Would the members of the Budget Committee please come to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Like metal. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. No, I know. It usually takes a couple times. So. It's better than executive. Executive, you can never. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. If everybody can take their seats and direct their attention over to the center U. I want to welcome everybody to the 2017 budget process, the first day of, I'm sure, a very invigorating and robust conversation we'll be having over the next couple of months. And I see Councillor Perks is nodding his head vigorously, so that's good news. I want to welcome all the members of the committee and the members of council and, of course, the public and the media. As you should know, at the screen at the back, you can look at the updates and know where we are on the agenda. It's really just one item on the agenda, which is presentations. You can also follow the proceedings on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. This is a special meeting of the Budget Committee with the launch of the 2017 rate-supported budget. I just want to remind everybody that there are no public deputations today. That will actually happen on November 18th at our next meeting. Just before we begin, I just want to thank our City Manager, Peter Wallace, who's not here today, but him plus our Chief Financial Officer, Rob Rossini, our Executive Director of Financial Planning, Josie Levita, as well as our Deputy City Managers, Juliana Carboni and John Livy, for all the time and work and dedication that they've been putting in. What we're seeing today is the result of a lot of work that the teams have been putting in over the last couple of months. I'd also like to extend a thanks to Lou DiGeronimo, who's the General Manager of the Toronto Water. And I would like to welcome Jim McKay, who is the new General Manager of Solid Waste, and Lauren Persico, who's the President of the Toronto Parking Authority, for their efforts so far. And also Stephen Conforti, who's the Manager of Financial Planning that has been guiding us all through this process. To begin, are there any declarations of conflict under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Layton, did you have a...
Yes, thank you very much. I almost forgot about this. As my partner has been on leave, parental leave, I need to declare an interest in the portions of the water budget pertaining to the Blue Flag program. As my wife works for an organization that receives a small operating or licensing fee for maintaining the national Canadian Blue Flag program.
Thank you. Any other conflicts? Okay, seeing none, I am going to pass it over to the DCM and CFO, Mr. Rossini, who's going to give us an initial presentation, and then we will work our way through, I believe, water, then solid waste, then parking authority. So what we'll do is after each presentation, we'll open it up for questions from councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chief. I'm going to be short, sweet, and brief. Just an overview of the three budgets and the rate budget process. So just for everybody, more for the public's clarification, we have a dual budget process, one for the tax-supported budget, which is all the services funded from property taxes, and the rate-supported budget, which are the three services in front of you today and that we're launching today that have no property tax support whatsoever in them. And they are the Toronto Water budget, which also includes wastewater, sewer, stormwater management, storm services, solid waste management services, which is the collection and disposal of all waste management, and then the parking authority. So we launched today, November 4th, the rate budget, and just anybody's interested, December 2nd, we get into the tax-supported budget launch. So what part of the budget are we talking about? So this is last year. It's about, in terms of the operating budget, the rate-supported budget is about 14% of almost $12 billion in operating spending. And if you just flip to page 4 on the capital side, if you look at the entire 10-year capital plan, the rate-supported services are about $12.5 billion currently approved last year, or 37% of the capital spending. So it is a very capital intensive service, particularly Toronto Water. So 5, just a big overview of what we're recommending. If you recall, Council for Toronto Water had a forecast already, a direction. We just finished 9 nines, 2 years of 8% increase, and then this would be the first year of 5% increase, and that's what's being recommended this year, and it was what was previously endorsed by Council. On the solid waste management side, we have a blended rate increase being proposed and recommended of 3.9%, and you'll see in Jim's presentation how that is broken up. And then parking authority, there are various rates that are applied across on basically on a per lot per area basis, and as I said, there's no tax support there. In terms of the schedule, page 6, we're launching today. We have budget briefings and public deputations on the rate budget only November 18th. And then we have a wrap-up meeting where hopefully we approve, Budget Committee approves the budget on November 28th. And then from there, it will go to Executive Committee of December 1st, and then go to Council of December 13th and 14th. We always try to wrap up the rate budgets by year end so that we can implement the new rates starting January 1, 2017, and get a full year collection of those revenues. And that's it. Any questions on the process? No?
Great, thanks, Rob.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, I guess we're going to begin first with water. So Lou, if you want to come up. Does everybody have a copy of the water budget and deck? Okay, great.
No, I'm good, thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to walk you through the 2017 water budget. Many of you have seen some of these slides before, so I won't dwell on some of them too long. We have made some adjustments. We're now up serving 3.6 million residents and businesses in Toronto and York region as there's continued growth happening within York and Toronto. And I'll talk a bit about some of the growth-related pressures we have, trying to keep up with growth. And it's isolated in the city, but it's something we're going to have to manage as we go forward. We have $28 billion of infrastructure we have to deal with, and as Rob mentioned, that generates a lot of capital demands. If we look at the breakdown of our assets, right now we still have wastewater combined with stormwater. We're looking at slowly pulling that apart, so you'd see then 3 baskets of assets, because we do have our operation already separated into 3 program areas, being the wastewater, stormwater, and water side of our operations. If we look at some of the strategic priorities that we've set out in Toronto Water, we align nicely with some of the city priorities. We've highlighted in yellow those areas that match directly with the city's strategic actions. And as I mentioned, every year we still stick with our 10-year plan. We've just revamped our 10-year plan because we completed our 5-year window. And some of the big items we accomplished, like the water meter program. So we've amended our programs and set in place another 5 years of key strategic initiatives. Here's our program map as we discussed between water treatment and supply, wastewater collection and treatment, and stormwater. Every year, our data on operating and capital for these 3 program areas are getting better. That area where we've been having to make improvements is the stormwater side, as we document and track our costs better on that side. Our organizational structure, this is the approved 2016 allocation of 1,780 staff approved funding for. Our program challenges, again, hasn't changed much from year to year. We stay focused on what we have to do, and that's putting in place the long-term financial strategy, which to make sure that we have a stable utility. And I think we've gone a long way to accomplish that. The key thing that we've had to manage in the last few years is the declining water consumption, and we believe with the program we put in place with the 2.8s, the 2.5s, and we're talking about the first 5 this year, it has pretty much dealt with that declining water issue. Aging infrastructure, state of good repair, we continue to make progress. Our backlog is decreasing. I have a slide on that. I'll show you that. Basement flooding remains a big challenge. Lots of work underway, and every year we'll keep giving you the updates on that. Regulatory environment is continually changing, and we're still responding to regulations at both the provincial and federal levels. Our reserve balance is healthy now. We're going to need it as we embark on some very large capital projects very soon. I'll highlight those in our presentation. And one of the key issues that you're going to hear us talking about early in 2017 is we will be doing more consultation on the stormwater management program and the creation of a separate costing model for that, pulling it out of the consumption rate and having it defined separately. If we take a look at financial performance over the past 15 years or so, our objective has been trying to maintain our operating costs as stable as possible by looking for efficiencies and looking for productivity in the way we do our work. And we've been able to do that pretty much for the past decade. We have seen a slight jump in costs as unit rates have gone up, and we've had some difficult winters. This year has been a pretty good year, and I'll touch on that as we get onto the next slide. So the budget challenges on the operating side. Let's start with the operating budget. As I mentioned, we're trying to keep our operating costs as stable as possible, but we get pressures on how to do that. We have to deal with inflation, and I'll walk you through how we try to mitigate that with some efficiency measures that we put in place. There is an impact as we complete some of our capital projects. Some of our capital projects are introducing new processes, things that we've never run before, and they're enhancing our system. So that does add operating costs as they come online, and that's something that we're going to have to track and follow in the course of the next 10 to 15 years. Other big issues, the asset management side, we're getting much better at developing long-term detailed asset management plans, and we're tying it closer to the risks we have, especially with extreme storm events. If we look then at the 2016 year, here's a projected year-end variance. So on the good news side, as we had probably the mildest year I've experienced as the general manager through the winter, we had a very mild winter, which meant a lower number of water main breaks. It's probably the lowest we've had in many, many years. And then we had a very hot, dry summer, which is actually good for our revenue side. So good news on both fronts. We are below expenditures, is that we had a mild year, and we're above on revenues because we had a hotter summer. And so we actually sold more water than we had forecasted. So we're sitting in a positive surplus position right now. If we look at the 2017 budget, so now we're presenting what we're proposing to you or recommending. We want to generate $1.23 billion. Most of it will be generated from the 5% water increase that Rob was talking about. 93% of the revenues come from that consumption rate. We also then look very closely at all the other fees we have, and there's a lot of adjustments made on those fees as well, as we try to align them more closely to the actual cost of providing those services. On the breakdown of once you get the $1.23 billion, where does it go? 64% of it goes directly into our reserve to deal with our capital programs. So we put in the bank and we draw from that to run our capital programs. The remainder is to run our operations. That remainder equates to about $443 million. And when we break it down into where that money is spent on the operations side, we're slightly different than many other divisions where salaries only comprise less than 40% of our spending. We procure a lot of things in Toronto Water, from electricity, chemicals, equipment, supplies, and you can see that in the materials and supplies section. It's a quarter of our budget. Services and rents, another 13%, and our charges, interdivisional charges, are 15%. So that's where we feel the pressure, is managing the impacts of inflation and where we and when we are purchasing things. If we look at a quick snapshot, our 2017 recommended base budget, we were given the same task as every other division, as trying to find reductions equating to a minus 2.6%. We went through all of our budget line items, and we're presenting a budget that gives you a net reduction year over year of a minus 1.6%. And this is what we're recommending. And how did we accomplish that? I talked about trying to maintain our stable operating costs. We've done that by putting in place a number of efficiency measures and some realignments to eliminate some duplication. So our starting pressure was about 16.6 million. We found 14.8 million in reductions on the expenditure side, and then we also found 8.1 million in revenue changes, revenue that we knew we would be getting in 2017. So when we add that together, we have a year-over-year decrease on net expenditures of $6.3 million. Here's a more detailed breakdown of that discussion I just put forward. Here's the starting pressures. The increases are on the left side of 16.6 million. You can see where it's broken down. It's still a summary level. We have more detail in the analyst notes, so you can look through those. But here it is summarized as the key drivers. On the reduction side, one of the big things that we were able to do, if you look on the reduction side, energy efficiencies, we pretty much offset a lot of the increase that we would get on the rate side of electricity by implementing a lot of efficiency measures in Toronto Water. In fact, we had a presentation in this committee room just a few weeks ago where we received an incentive check of $1.6 million from Toronto Hydro for one of our programs that had demonstrated a sustained drop in our pumping strategies. So we've been making investments that are reducing our energy costs. If you look at our vacancies, because when you look at some of our expenditures, Toronto Water has a constant changeover of staff. If you look at the profile, the demographics of our staff, within the next 5 years, 39% of our staff are eligible for unreduced retirements. Doesn't mean they're taking them. It's just a statistic that we have that turnover happening. What we also find in the marketplace is it's difficult sometimes to find qualified candidates for some critical positions. We have a lot of technical positions or positions in trades, for example, or operators that require 4 years of on-the-job training to be fully certified. So that makes it a challenge to keep that vacancy rate low, but we do have a number of strategies in place to manage that. In fact, we have reduced the vacancies to the lowest levels I've seen as a general manager, and we keep making improvements. On the capital side, now let's get into the capital budget. The big issue that we're starting to see now is managing and planning for growth. And that does not mean in the treatment plant side. We're fine capacity-wise in our treatment plants, both water and wastewater. Where we're seeing the challenges is actually within the conveyances and within the distribution system. When increased densities come in, our infrastructure does not match what is being asked for in an application process. We may need to upgrade some of the infrastructure around that. And we're seeing that challenge more and more as the development intensifies within the city. Our aging infrastructure, our State of Good Repair program, remains the largest component of our program, and I'll walk you through that. Basement flooding, another significant program, and it's just growing in the next few years. And that's why we have to maintain that reserve balance, as we've got a lot of big projects about to come online to be tendered next year, in fact. If we quickly look at some of the accomplishments in 2016, on water treatment supply side, we've invested over $100 million in our water mains last year, between replacement and structural relining. Significant progress being made on the linear infrastructure. If we take a look at capital spending or year-over-year comparison, this is a year-to-date snapshot. The October numbers are in now, and we're ahead of last year's spending rate. We might not hit our 85% target, but we think we're going to be around 80% range. There's a number of reasons why we're slightly off. A lot of them have to do with tendering delays and some performance issues on some contractors who are not moving as quickly as we would like. Our cash flow expectations were that they would get more work done. They're a little bit behind. If we look at comparison, 2016 capital spending as a comparator, as you see, we're ahead, and we expect to land just below 80% at the end of the year. Why are we still confident of that? Because we already have $1 billion of committed contracts in hand. So work is happening, it's just slightly delayed. Here's a look at our ability to deliver capital over the last few years. Several years we exceeded our capital delivery targets. Many years we've been very close. So we can deliver a lot of capital now in Toronto Water with the help of our colleagues in engineering and construction services. We thank them for all their efforts as well. On the capital, on the growth side, the capital gross budget for 2017 is recommended to be $859 million. As you can see, the bulk of that still remains the undergrounds, water mains and sewers, basement flooding type projects. Our plants remain a big component and will for a number of years. On a project category basis, state of good repair remains the largest component of our capital program. 64% of the budget next year is going to deal with their backlog. We still are dealing with some legislated issues, and the service improvement slide, those are the enhancements that we're making to our sewers, particularly the basement flooding programs and the wet weather flow programs. If we do a year-over-year comparison of our 10-year capital plan, we have adjusted the capital plan, and you can see that between, I guess you call that the turquoise bars and the green bars. We've had to slide the program out a bit, and that is in direct relation to just the programs some big projects are taking a little bit longer to be tendered. But that's why you see a big jump in years 2018, 19, and 20. We're actually forecasting to spend more than we told you last year, because when those projects hit, there's essentially 3 big projects to be awarded next year. Those 3 alone are over $1 billion in contract value, just 3 projects of the hundreds that we do. So we're quite confident that once they're running, that money will be used up. Here is the capital plan by category. Again, you can see state of good repair over the next 10 years remains the key focus, but you see a growth in the service improvement slide. That's the purple band. That is the basement flooding and wet weather flow projects. So coupled with the conversation that we're having with stormwater charges, what we're telling the public and the associations and the groups that we're meeting with is that that program, that part of our capital program, grows from about 18% at this point in time to about 40% in 10 years. So that's something that we're going to need to address as stormwater capital continues to grow. We need to make sure how we generate the revenues to fund this program more closely aligns to how we're charging. And right now, it is not aligned. We're charging it on the basis of how much water you consume through a meter. On the capital plan by asset class, here's a breakdown. Very similar, but this is the 10-year profile. The bulk of the money going into our undergrounds and our treatment plants. You see the blip in the middle. That's a lot of work happening in Ashbridges Bay. Ashbridges Bay alone, in the course of the next 10 years, has $1.7 billion earmarked for it. Here's an overview of the 10-year plan for our 3 program areas, $12.2 billion total, $4.3 billion for water treatment and supply, $4.9 billion in wastewater treatment and collection, and $3 billion in stormwater management. As you can see, the stormwater component becomes quite significant after 10 years. On the state of good repair, the key initiative of what started the 9 for 9 campaigns, the good news is we continue to reduce the backlog. It's going down. And will continue to go down with the program we put in front of you. Our service levels, we are tracking our service levels in the system. I'm not going to read those numbers. You've got the details. You can ask me questions later on. But I will highlight one on our service standards, and it's something that we've tried to address in this budget. a water service line leaking, for example, when we get a call, we've not been hitting our targets. Toronto Water is realigning itself, and it will become effective January 1, and some of that realignment's reflected in this budget. And what we're trying to do is put our frontline staff closer with our customer service staff to try to improve customer response, and all of that will be rolling out in January. So we want to try to tackle that particular issue and get to our calls sooner, particularly on this metric that we have. The recommended water rates, as Rob mentioned, we had put in the 5% for this year and next year, and subsequently it's 3% after that. So those are the key assumptions that we put in for the rates. For consumption, we look very closely at the consumption numbers. Last year, we did reduce consumption by 1.5%. Then we had a really good year this year. So once we start tracking the line, what we're comfortable recommending is a 0.5% drop per year, each year in our 10-year plan. And that matches then the profile, generates sufficient money to fund our capital program, and tries to manage that decline in consumption that we're seeing. And our expenditure forecast on capital for this year, it's going to be 80%. We still plug 85% in our rate model. If we look at population and water consumption, as you can see, we still, and this is total consumption. This is not per capita. I do have a per household number, but when you look at water consumption, total consumption continues to drop as our population grows. So we are becoming much more efficient in the use of water. If we look at our annual chart, well, if you look at the peak in August, you could see that we had a good year. We're higher than we've been in many years for summer production. But the key thing you have to look at is February and April. You can see actually they're the lowest they've been. So that still tells us that there's a continued drop in total consumption. We just saw a blip this summer because it was very hot and dry. When we look at our rates going forward, we remain competitive as we compare ourselves in the GTA. This year, for the first time, we get to show a Peel community, Mississauga, with a stormwater component added to it. Peel typically does not have a storm component, but Mississauga introduced a stormwater component, and we're going to keep tracking that number and show it to you annually. On the industrial side, we remain in the lower band and remain competitive with the industrial rates. I put this slide back in. We used to show it a few years ago. I thought it was relevant to show it again because we're talking about the drop in consumption and the impact to households of the water rate increases. And homeowners have been adjusting their behaviors, and they've mitigated some of the impacts of the rate increases. So this slide's showing and this is the per household drop. So we're down to 265 cubic meters per year per household. When we started this, we were at 324. So there is that downward trend, which is a good thing. If though a household maintained its consumption at the 2008 level, it would have been paying that green band. It would have been paying close to $1,100 for the whole year, using over 700 cubic meters. But in fact, the average household is only using around 600 cubic meters now. They've been able to blunt some of the impact of the rate increases by modifying their consumption. And here is the impact to them a year over year chart basis using the new average household consumption of 265 cubic meters for the year. Total cost will be $914 in 2016 rates. For 2017 projected, it would jump to $960, an addition of $46. And our projected rate increases, as we discussed, next year we're plugging in another 5%, and then we drop to the 3% range after that period. And that is the presentation.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate that. We'll open it up for questions. Now, as has been customary, we do questions of the committee members first, then we go to outside committee members. That's been a sort of standard that the committee has wanted over the last couple of years. So I will open it up to committee members for questions. I have Councillor Carroll first, then Councillor Layton.
Oh, we're going first.
Yes, we're going first.
Okay. I have to remember my question. I was just making a joke about the water consumption between 85 and 95. Those are the diaper years of millennials. So I guess we used a lot of water. But I did have some, yes, it was a burden for both divisions. So I did have, so basement flooding and wet weather flow, was that always in service improvement?
Sorry, yes, it was always a service improvement, because the basement flooding program, the policy that we brought forward and council endorsed, was an enhancement to old service levels. So we are looking at giving greater protection. So that is truly a service level improvement. And wet weather flow is an improvement based on the existing system that we have today. So we are enhancing our capture rate, so it is also another service improvement.
And wet weather flow, we should ask the big question. Wet weather flow, will that be part of the cost that will be shifted over into the new separate stormwater surcharge?
Yes.
Actually, maybe the bigger question is right here and now, so that you get a chance to clarify a week later. Speak to us of this roof tax we've heard so much about.
Well, it won't be a roof tax. What it will be is
Tell us what it really is, Lou.
what it really is, and I put the slide up to show you essentially the two big capital components in the program. It is basement flooding protection. It is wet weather flow, the wet weather flow master plan. But it would also include then stormwater pipes when we do stormwater and stormwater ponds, et cetera. That's the type of work that we complete within those two programs, just to give you an indication. So what it is actually we are already doing the work today. We're funding it, though, based on the revenues we generate from how much water is being consumed by homeowners and businesses. What we're proposing to do is to take that revenue out of the water rate and account for it separately, and then coming up with a tiered flat rate charge for most of our customers. And we're working on those tiers now. We just presented a conceptual model to a stakeholder group a couple weeks ago, showing 4 different tiers for residential, for ICI, for our various components. And then our largest properties, that group of over 1 hectare in size, is about 5,000 accounts. There we would do a more detailed calculation based on the percentage they have of impervious pavement. And that could be a roof, but it could also be parking lot, could be pads, et cetera. And we calculate the runoff, so the impact they have on the stormwater system. So it's a reflection of their burden on the total system. You give us more water, we have more water that we have to manage. If you give us less water, there's a less of an impact. That's essentially the concept, as simple as I can put it.
Right.
We're trying to come up with a system that approximates that concept.
That was much more simple than I think is being put across. But you have mentioned something that I think is being missed in all this discussion that preceded today. So when we get down to the granular level of people's homes, there is a detailed calculation. It's not straight how big is your roof, it's how big is your roof in relation to the landscape surface, the planning guidelines, and the neighborhood you live in. There is a detailed calculation happening this year.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and that would be only for the largest properties. What we did is we analyzed on an aggregate level. We used some geographic information software and analysis that we did, where we came up with roughly a ratio, vegetated areas, et cetera, on an aggregate level, and came up with a ratio split for residential, and used that average to come up with the different tiers. So we did do some analysis on it, but we're not doing property by property. We have over 500,000 properties to do. We would bog down trying to analyze each property. So what we've done is come up with a formula that essentially addresses one component, which would be there's a fixed cost to run the system, and everybody would pay towards that. And then and that's tied to size of property. And then what we did is we also looked at a percentage of impervious, and we've put that in the formula that generates the rates as well. For the largest properties, that's where we're going to do the more detailed calculations on the ratios.
Great. And you have some money in the operating budget for all of those, to do all that work in 2017?
Only to finish the reports. We're going to come forward in the spring of 2017 with all of the feedback we received during our consultation, and we will then provide you a final recommended rate structure with numbers, and also a request for the staff that we would need to administer that program. I had envisioned then that would be spring of 2017, probably referred then to the 2018 budget process. We would take that information, program it, and get council approval for 2018, and we do our hiring, and we'd start actually implementing it.
Oh, okay, because
The
that
rate
was my
wouldn't
last
start to
question. You need
2019.
specialized staff,
I need
right?
specialized staff, I need to get people involved. We actually need to work with the customers too, prior to the launch, and that's the feedback we're getting from them. Let us set it up and get it right, and so there's a lot of work that should be done in 2018 with the big companies and our big properties, so we go live with the charge January 1, 2019. That's what we're proposing right now.
Okay.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. And first off, congratulations on the award from Toronto Hydro. The kilowatt hour per liter of water pumped continues to go down, and you should be commended for that. That's great.
That's our team you need to commend. That's our operators and our management team. They are the ones implementing it.
And the 5.5 million that in new efficiency savings, what does that translate to in a rate for an average family?
5 million on our budget is, what, half a percentage point roughly
Okay.
of a rate increase?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Industrial water surcharge agreements.
Yes,
These are agreements that
my favorite topic.
agreements that we enter into with industrial water polluters that aren't able to meet our sewer bylaw. Something like that, right?
They exceed the limits of the bylaw, so they either have to do additional treatment before they discharge, and or enter into an agreement if we can treat it at the plant. So it's only for treatable parameters.
For treatable parameters.
Yes.
So we do the treatment that they can't do on site or don't do on site.
That's correct, and then we charge them extra
We
for
charge
that.
them for it. The sewer use bylaw, the thresholds, who sets those and who requires us to clean that effluent out?
The limits were set over time, over the years, with consultation with the Ministry of Environment and other municipalities, as well as your ability for your treatment plants to manage that kind of strength. So they kind of evolved over time is probably the best way to describe it, but it links to the ability of your treatment plant to handle that volume of loading or that concentration, and so that's how it happened.
And there's a requirement on behalf of the city for Toronto Water to meet discharge rates coming out of our plants.
Yes, our environmental conditions require us to meet certain parameters when we discharge our effluent. So what we have to try to do is manage what's coming in, because if we're getting something too strong coming in, it will impact what goes out the back end, and then we'll be non-compliant with our treatment plants. So that's why we have these programs.
We're being told to be compliant, and so what we're doing is we're saying to some businesses, a small number of businesses that are actually unable to treat their own effluent on site, that we will at a cost. Right now, that cost is calculated based on the parameter that exceeds the sewer bylaw the most.
That's correct. We're charging for only one parameter. They may exceed on 2 or 3. There's only a few companies that exceed on more than one. But we only charge on that one parameter that they exceed the
So
greatest.
who pays for the other parameters to get cleaned up in the cases of those handful of companies that aren't paying for
Essentially, that's blended in the total rate base.
the rate? And how much, do we know how much of value that is?
It's roughly about $1.5 to $1.6 million.
So 1.5 or 1.6 million dollars?
Fluctuates depending on how many companies we have on agreements.
And how many companies on agreement are exceeding by more than one parameter?
No, but that are exceeding by more than one parameter. We have 260 agreements now. I'd have to get back to you with that number, sorry, specifically, because it fluctuates, it changes. Companies come and go. I'll have
You
to-
said a few. We'll call it 20?
Probably around that range. This is only a small number.
Okay. So a small percentage. And how many industrial water customers does the city of Toronto have?
Industrial accounts? Gloriana, do you know that?
How many commercial accounts does
Commercial. The total commercial, I do know the number of total in ICI, that's
Perfect.
bigger class. That's about 16,000 accounts.
So 16,000
That
accounts.
includes institutional. Yeah,
But
hospitals.
16,000 accounts, 260 have industrial water surcharge agreements.
Yes.
20 of those are exceeding on more than one parameter. But all 1,600 businesses are paying for those, the additional parameters that those, the $1.5 million that is.
Well, no, it would be all ratepayers. That would
All
be
ratepayers.
spread across the
So
whole
the
rate base.
16,000 companies that could be their competitors, as well as every residential.
That's correct. It's just spread on the general rate base.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Campbell for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk a little bit about staffing. You've indicated on page, I think it's 17, a reduction of 6 positions. But for 2015 and 16, you were operating with about 1,610 or 20 positions. So your ask for 2017 is still considerably higher than what your actual is. And I'm just wondering if you've gone through sort of a line-by-line review of all of the positions in the organization to see if you really need about 140 more people than you're sitting with.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the answer is yes, we have. And that's where we identified those areas where we can offer up some reductions.
But that's only 6.
And the key reason what you have to look at is the turnover factor. So when you look at a number and you look at over time and you would say to yourself, Toronto Water's running with 140 to 190 vacancies on an annual basis. Well, they're not the same vacancies. If they were always the same vacancies, then I'd understand your argument and agree with you. But they're not. They change. So when you look at the turnover rate, and that's why I had that other slide saying I have 39% of my workforce can retire in 5 years. What we see is a constant turnover. What's different about Toronto Water as well, we've got a lot of job classifications, technical ones. So for example, let's take a Toronto Fire. When they go out and hire and say they need 150 firefighters, they can go out and hire 150 and train them all at once. Well, my 150 aren't all firefighters. I need 5 chemists. I need 8 engineers. I need 2 technicians. I need 2 millwrights, 10 electricians. So that's what I'm dealing with. It's a multitude of different trades.
So I get that, but in each area, it's not like you're missing one unique person. It's one person that's part of a team of doing similar tasks.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you've looked at it on a workload basis. So you might have 10 engineers specializing
Yes.
in a certain area. You've been short 1 engineer on an ongoing basis. Have you looked at the workloads of those people in those roles to say, maybe we can get by with 8 instead of 10?
Yes, and that's what I said. That's what we did, and it's proposed in this budget with first response. We're moving units over from one group to another and combining them under a different director, and we were able to eliminate some of the duplication that existed when they were separated, and that's where we got to some of the reductions. But to use your example of the engineer, again, it's not the one engineer that sits empty. We will fill that one engineer position and get a new person on, and then it'll be a different engineer in that unit that will move on. And so that unit is still now down 1, but it's a different person. And so then we start the competition yet again. In many cases, too, there's internal promotions. So when we post a position and we hire a senior engineer, quite likely an engineer, I don't want to call them junior because they're not, but an engineer becomes a senior engineer, which creates a vacancy in that same group. Someone's been promoted, and now I got to fill the one behind it. And there is another 6-month process to fill.
In regard to the stormwater review of pricing, is it, this is going to be coming in 2017, or is it for 2018?
So the report for council to make the final decision will be coming in 2017.
And is this intended to be revenue neutral, or is it going to be a cash grab for Toronto Water?
It is intended to be revenue neutral.
So is it?
It will impact customers differently, just so we're absolutely clear, and this is what we're telling the groups that we're engaged with. Depending on what category you're in, there's shifts for customers, but on the aggregate basis, we're taking the same amount out of the rate, and that pie then just gets divvied up differently.
How do you think people will react if you've got two groups of families? One might be a single person. You might have a household next door. They've got similar characteristics of building and lot size and so on. One's got 6 teenagers, a pool, and a sprinkler system, and the other one's on their own. And now all of a sudden, they're going to be paying similar stormwater rates, and their overall costs are not going to be based on usage.
So what I'd say in
I
that
don't see how that's gonna fly.
that example, their impact to the storm system now will be more equitably contributed to, because you have, you just said they're the same, so I'm getting probably the same runoff from them. So they're paying the same. I'd say on the storm side, that's more equitable. Where you're going to get the swing then is on the consumption side. So that household with a lot of people on it, they're going to see a drop in their rate.
The people that are using the most water are going to see the drop.
But so essentially what's happening, if you're using a lot of water right now, you're contributing a lot more towards storm water, yet you have the exact same impact as your neighbor who might not be contributing as much. So it actually helps deal with the equity. It's more closely related to the service you get and how you pay for it. And then the consumption side is truly then the cost for me to provide you drinking water and sanitary treatment services. And what I charge you for that is more closely reflected.
Well, I'll look forward to that discussion next.
Thank you,
We'll be ready.
Next, Councillor Burnside.
No, it's the people that are speaking in our ear when we're trying to listen, Councillor. And now it's my turn to, now it's my turn to speak. Okay?
Right, right.
So if you
Councillor
could maybe
Burnside, just questions?
focus on your own life.
Got it.
Councillor Burnside for questions.
Thank you. So you're splitting off these rates, right? In terms of stormwater and consumption and whatnot.
We're looking at it.
Okay, so
Council
you're
still
looking at-
needs to make that final
But
determination.
that's where you're going. So
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, on the stormwater side, you said you need to ultimately increase your revenue because you're going from 18%, I think, to 40% of the budget? So it's not going to be, it's currently would be an even, if you're proposing, what you're proposing is currently an even split, but you would actually see the stormwater side go up at some point, correct?
Mr. Chair, what I'd say to you is that's why you've been seeing rate increases as well. So we've forecasted right now, what we put in front of you, that 10-year plan, can fund that storm program. And you could stick with this model, and we could fund it. What we're saying, though, is that 10 years from now, when the storm capital program is roughly 40% of your capital, you're going to have greater inequities between the people that use a lot of water and how they pay for our service. So that's why we're proposing adjusting it now. So in future, though, I think the point you're getting to is, will there be debates on how much to charge for storm and how fast it should go up? Absolutely, there will be. And what we're saying that is actually a fair democratic process as well. Because then when we put our budget in front of you, you can then debate what should the water and sanitary rate be based on whatever those cost drivers are. And on the storm side, you can debate how fast or how slow you would like to go with those programs and adjust that rate accordingly as well.
Okay, and that makes sense on when you explain it that way, but when you're talking about residential customers,
Yes.
you're not getting down to that granular level that you are with, I think you said commercial customers over a certain
Over 1
size.
hectare
1
in
hectare?
size.
Yeah.
So that's at the start of the program. So do we envision the program improving and getting to that level of granularity? I would say yes. At some point in time, we would come forward to council and say we've got now the system up and running, we've got the billing procedures in place, we have the analytical tools, we have the right staff. we would make a recommendation to say, drive it down to another class of customers. So ultimately, I'd love to have a system where we can assess every property and also provide incentives to every property if it makes sense. But that's going to take us many years to build that type of program.
So, yeah, so my concern would be if you have two houses side by side and the same size and whatnot, but one homeowner has actually, added a parking pad that's not being captured by the city or has added more hard surface area, that they would be paying the same rate for stormwater management as the person beside them, right? Because you're not getting down to that level to
Here,
look
Mr.
at.
Chair, that's correct at the beginning. At some point in time, we would like to be able to come forward and say we would like to modify the program. We know we can do it effectively and efficiently, right? I have to make sure that I'm not going to have errors, because then I'm going to be disputing with homeowners. You have a pad or not? Is it impervious? How do I manage that? So ultimately, the answer is yes. I'd love to be able to do that, but allow us to set up the system first and then come back to you.
So when you say ultimately, what would you think that timeline would be? Like 1 year, 5 year, 10 years?
Probably around 5-year time frame for the smaller lots. We might be able to do sooner on some of the other ICI customers, but the small lots is the most difficult because that's where you have the greatest level of changes. One of the issues that I raise with my staff from an audit perspective is if I come today and assess your property, well, how am I going to assess you 2 or 3 years from now if you make a change? How am I going to determine that the change happened and that in fact you're still giving me that reduced stormwater retention because you did something? Well, you could change it on me. Well, how do I know that? And then how's that fair? So there's a lot of work to still be done to make sure that we have a good monitoring system, not just the initial, here's your rate.
Right.
Well, how do I continually monitor it?
Because ultimately, your goal is for people to pay for what they're contributing. I'll use that word loosely. But if you don't actually have that analysis going on, then it's really, you're not doing that at all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what I would say is we're not doing that at all for sure right now. What we're proposing would be better than what we're doing. Still not the best, but it is definitely in the right direction. So I'm proposing an incremental approach to getting to a better and better system.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Nunziata for questions.
Thank you. I just want to ask a couple of questions on the basement flooding. So when we had the storm in 2013 and going through all those meetings, and at that point with TRCA, we were told by TRCA that there was a lot of investment and capital money that had to be allocated for their infrastructure work that they had to do. So what is their investment now as far as the basement flooding 3 years later? Are they investing? Are they making any requests to the city for their infrastructure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. The short answer is yes. We do have their component of capital requests within Toronto Water's budgets that relate to basement flooding or erosion control measures, a number of what we call the riverine or flooding issues, and that's included in this submission. They are still completing other studies, and particularly in your ward. They are still finalizing their environmental assessment on the impact in the Rockcliffe area to see what can be done. We had a recent meeting with them on that, and we're trying to marry up their environmental assessment with the work that we have done. We've done a basement flooding environmental assessment as well as a sanitary trunk sewer environmental assessment in your ward, and I'm trying to get all of those costs aligned. Those costs are quite significant, and we're going to be reporting in 2017 on that.
So they are.
They're still working on it.
In their environmental assessment.
They are working. Yes, they're almost completed it.
Okay. On page 24, where you say that spending to date is lagging due to delayed contract awards and some performance issues with contractors and consultants. So can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure.
Because some of what's happened in the past year, there's been a lot of delays in road work, and because of the contractors, and as well as that there's water work to be done on the same street.
Yes.
So is that the reason for all these delays? Is that we're having problems with the contractors? And
In some
performance?
cases, yes, but it's not so much on the linear side for our program. The bigger dollar amounts are actually in a couple projects within our treatment plants that are a big dollar value.
Yeah.
There were order of magnitude about $150 million contracts. We had expected them to be further ahead in their construction, and so therefore we had programmed a certain amount of cash flow. Well, they're not as far along, so we didn't use up that money. Doesn't mean we're not going to. We will use it. It's just delayed.
So it just gets carried over to the...
It gets carried over. So part of the budget submission is, I think there's about 125 million roughly of carry forwards being projected. And that's where on this slide where I showed you, we still have $1 billion of active commitments. Those are signed contracts. We're doing the work. It's when are we going to spend the money? So we are aligning the cash flow based on what's actually happening on the ground.
And you're coordinating a lot of these projects as well with transportation. So these projects are being delayed 2 or 3 years because
That's on the
that
planning
hasn't
side.
happened, yeah.
Yeah, so that
Correct?
would be on the planning and programming side. That wouldn't really affect so much this in-year spending. What it does affect is the other slide I showed you where we pushed out some of the capital program here. So once we sit down and we start to align the programs, work that we wanted to get done in 2018 might be pushed out now a couple years to make sure we're married up with all the other divisions. Then I have to reprogram it. It changes this bar graph and pushes work out.
Okay. When Councillor Layton asked the question about industrial users, do you have, I mean, as you know, we've lost a lot of industry in the city, and they've moved out of the city because of the high cost to remain in the city of Toronto. How many industrial users have we lost over the years because of the increased rates?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have that information. We'd have to get that from Economic Development Group.
Okay,
I don't have that data.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's all the committee. Oh, sorry, Councillor DiCiano. You're right.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just quickly, does it make sense for our largest industrial users to be investing in stormwater tanks, retention tanks on sites with, 10, 15, 20, 50 acres of hardscape so that we don't have to deal with their water during these heavy storms?
Through Mr. Chair, the premise that we're putting forward to them, especially if they have large properties, and we start introducing this rate, that yes, economically, it might make sense for them to do that. Right now, it doesn't. They actually,
No incentive.
it really doesn't matter to them, right? And especially if they're a large property and a low water user, right? So when you're talking about the swings between the classes, as I do the consultation, what you invariably get is a group of people saying, hurry up and do it because I'm going to get a drop because I use a lot of water. And then you get the other customers who are saying, well, no, slow it down because I don't want to pay more. So it really is, I'm hearing both. I think everyone agrees on the concept or understands the concept. How's that? They're all wondering how we're going to implement it and how it's going to impact them at the end of the day when they have to pay. So once you have a system of charging, especially if they're a big property, then you have the ability to give them some incentives so they can reduce it. That's when you'll see some capital investments, I think, potentially.
Okay. And just to talk about the limits that some of our polluters exceed with respect to our bylaws, is it true that for some people that need to clean the limits before it gets into our storm sewers that they have to take more chlorine out of the water than we deliver them water with chlorine? Does that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't call it chlorine. It might be chlorides.
Okay.
Which is more like salts as opposed to the chlorine that we use. When we're dealing with some people that are just discharging into storm, you use the word storm, they're taking groundwater in particular and then putting it in our storm system. Well, there are limits to what you could put in the storm for a variety of parameters. And what we see typically in the cities, it could be a chloride issue, could be manganese as another issue, or it could be even worse if it's a brownfield site. And so that's why we ask for testing. The two components of storm that you need to look at are not only the quantity, how much is being pulled out of the ground, and can we handle it with our pipes, but it's also the quality. You can't just take something that's contaminated in the ground, pull it out, put it in the pipe, and then discharge it into your local creek, because that's where the stormwater goes. So that's why we track it and say that sometimes, yes, you must treat before you can discharge it to the open environment.
But are some of our users having to treat it and take out more salts or chlorides than we actually deliver to them in the water?
Well, I don't deliver it to them groundwater. So that's the issue, is that anything that I deliver to them through the potable water system, they can return to me in the sanitary, and I'll deal with that. What's happening in the city is people are pulling out what we call private water, it's groundwater, and I don't control the groundwater. The groundwater is a function of nature and whatever we might have done to that land over the last 150 years. So that's why we have those systems. So I wouldn't agree with that comment. It has nothing to do with my drinking water. It's a completely different source of water.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to outside councillors now. Councillor de Beermaker is first.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. DiGeronimo, for protecting our water supply for these many years. You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that there are 3 big projects next year that alone were about $1 billion. Can you just let me know what those are?
Sure. The 3 projects that we're hoping to tender, I talked to Michael DeAndrea this morning. He's promising me we're tendering them. There's one that's called the Don Trunk Combined Sewer Overflow and Coxwell Twinning Project. Essentially is putting in a large tunnel that runs on the lower Don area. Essentially starts up where the bend in the Don River starts, hooks all the way around and goes to the Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant. That's order of magnitude about $440 million phase 1 work. We're also then building brand new pumping stations at Ashbridges Bay to handle that flow from a wet weather perspective, but also new pumping stations for our dry weather. So right now we have 2 pumping stations north of the plant. We're going to decommission those and have a brand new facility in the plant and to handle all our needs for the next 100 years or more. That pumping station complex is about 430 million range. And then we're going to have also a new outfall with ultraviolet disinfection at Ashbridges Bay. That component of work is also an order of magnitude of $350 to $400 million.
And thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I believe, I think it was 2003 when we had the very large power outage, which I would say perhaps could have put our water supply for this city at risk. I think you embarked, or the department embarked on a way to make sure we could continue to supply water even if there was a large power outage. Are we there yet? And is it in your budget to make sure that our pumping stations, I'll call it, are safe and have backup systems in case of a large power outage?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what we got council to approve is putting in place backup power generators in our pumping stations as we complete the upgrades to those pumping stations. Because what we found when we started the project is quite a number of our older pumping stations did not have the electrical infrastructure up to proper codes, from switch gears all the way through, in order to just come in and put in backup power. Otherwise, if it did, we would have just said, let's do it everywhere. So because it requires a lot of upgrade work, we're timing the implementation to when we upgrade the pumping stations. So yes, we are doing it, but we're doing it in a systematic fashion. We won't have it fully protected probably for another 10 to 12 years.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I think on slide 42, I'll maybe start with that one. I think it's actually a very good chart to show what we've done as a city. The cost of water goes up and the consumption goes down. It's not quite a one-to-one relationship. But wouldn't you say this has been a very, very successful way for us to encourage people to become more water efficient? By raising the price of water, we've given people a financial incentive to save water, and the evidence is pow, it's right here.
I would say that it's absolutely a strong component of it is price. It's not the only component, because I have seen similar profiles in other municipalities where the rates haven't gone up as much. You still are seeing a per capita drop. So it is a trend that's happening in municipalities as we change out our infrastructure, but it does help. And where it does help is on some of the larger users. For example, downtown, a lot of the cooling towers used to use a flow-through water system. They used to just take our water, dump it back in again. As water rates go up, that's too expensive. Now they have closed-loop systems, so they've made investments, right? So that's where it really triggers if you're large water users. For homeowners, it does impact it, but as you change your toilets out to low-flow toilets, use better washing machines, that's where you're seeing it, is in the change of everything else.
And through you, Mr. Chair, but in terms of cost avoidance in your budget, if we made water efficiency mandatory, because right now low-flow toilets are not mandatory.
No, they are now. They are. The province changed the building code,
Oh, okay, sorry.
and it is now mandatory even on remodeling. So we lobbied for many years, and they finally did that. So it's in the building code.
So if we can, as a city, require more of these water efficiency measures, would that not help us financially as a city avoid certain costs?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that the investments we did make, because we did make significant investment in our water efficiency programs for probably about 6-7 years, they were quite effective and delivered what we wanted and more. So my argument to you is I don't think we need to do that anymore. The snowball is rolling down the hill right now. Our society itself is changing, and we no longer need to put the incentives in the way that we did previously. We had to get it started, and our programs made sense. Right now, what you're seeing is the change-out happening naturally, and it continues. The second that starts to change, you may see me say something differently.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Davis next, then Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have what I think is kind of a simple question, but I don't want to sound stupid, but so you've cut the operating budget by 1.6%. The capital budget is lower in 2017 than 2016, and yet the rates are going up 5%. So can you just explain that?
Sure. Lost the presentation there, so I'll have to just go by memory. And so actually we aren't cutting the operating expenditures. Essentially, we flatlined it. If you forget the slide number, but it's on.
We don't have any.
We have a slide.
Charts.
I have a slide here. It shows that we are.
Oh, yes, we have.
We're dropping. Essentially, I was dealing with an ongoing pressure on the operating side, increase of 16.6 million. We reduced some of our expenditures,
Right.
and so we're showing an increase of $1.7 million or 0.4% on the gross expenditure side.
Okay, all right.
So essentially, we mitigated all of the pressures, and
Okay.
what we were able to do is increase other revenues. That's the non-metered component, so other fees that we collect. That's an extra $8 million. When you net that out, there's an increase then. We could take that savings then and put it towards our capital program. So the 5% rate increase plus the drop that we have in the net expenditures comparatively goes to capital. So that's why capital jumps
Okay.
10%.
So when you look, though, on page 28, which is the 2016 approved to 2017 draft.
Yes.
Because we don't have a chart on the actual capital expenditures.
So
Okay. It's still much lower than the 2016 approved budget.
right. So what's missing, I think, on some of those bar charts, here, I'll fix it, Rob, is the carry forward component of our program. We have
Okay.
cash that's still in the system and we're paying. But what it's doing is, all it's doing is shifting when we're going to spend the money. That's all it's doing. So we still need the money because we have contracts. And Steve Conforti will give you some of the
So
details.
it's going to
on how
go into the
accounted
reserve
for.
or
Yeah, so
something?
Steve, if you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to note, so what you're seeing is you are seeing a reduction in the 17, but that's really the
Yes.
effect of smoothing out cash flows and aligning
Right.
it with when the spending is going to actually occur. If you look at the 10-year program in total, specifically the 9 common years that would have been in last year's plan versus this year's plan, you're going to see an increase of $540 million.
In the 10-year plan, but I'm talking about 2017.
Yes.
2017
So all
is
of
adjusted.
these are smoothed, so the rates are going up 5%. The operating budget is going up 1.7 million. That's minuscule on the overall budget. And the capital spending in 2017 is going down.
So
So,
now I got the slide up, and I'll walk you through what happens then with the cash, because why is it going to reserve?
No, I understand. You're smoothing this all out and you are putting it into reserve, presumably.
It's not a smoothing, it's actually addressing when the cash is going to be spent. Last year, we had expected certain contracts to be let, they're not let out yet, so we don't need to spend that cash, it stays in the reserve.
Okay,
So now we're going to
I've got other
let the
questions.
contract out, and we're going to spend the money now.
okay. I got the big project. What are the legislative, so on the chart that shows the different, okay, so on page 30, it shows in 2017 as well that we're spending less on stormwater management, which surprises me because I thought we were going to be spending more on stormwater management.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, that would be timing with specific projects. So it doesn't mean that we aren't programming more work for storm, we are. It's when the contracts can be let and when they start construction and when we're actually
Does
starting.
that mean we're not doing as much work on stormwater projects in 2017?
So we're finishing up some projects that we had on the books, so we're closing them out as new ones are ramping up.
I'm
So there's
just-
always some in the program.
This shows we're spending significantly less than last year, and there's
Yes.
more, so we're spending less on stormwater.
Well, one of the things
Maybe I
that
can get an update on this.
I could give it to you separate, but a quick answer is, as we close out projects, sometimes we will have unspent contingency, which we'll pull out, and then we can put that back in reserve, because we haven't used all of the money. That will show a drop, that we didn't spend as much money. That hurts your target, but it's actually a good thing. We save the money, and we put it back in reserve.
No, we want our stormwater projects to proceed
They were done, that's what I'm saying.
expeditiously
It's
and
completed. We didn't need as much money as we said. We could return it to reserve, but when I present it to you, it shows it as a decreased amount.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perks next.
Could we have another round?
It's up to the Budget Committee.
Okay.
Yeah, you're.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to pursue the line of questioning that Councillor de Beermaker was heading down, but perhaps with a different emphasis. So Toronto's water consumption per capita, how does it compare to other cities in the world, say European cities, for example? Still about at least twice, right?
I wouldn't say twice now, but we're still much higher than Europe, Australia. So some of those other jurisdictions where they've had in place two things. One is scarcity of supply and/or quality, and had a higher cost profile for many years. They do have much lower per capita than us. We're still pretty good in relation to some other cities, but U.S. and Canada, we're the highest in the world still.
Yeah, so we could still maintain a very, very high standard and quality of life with much lower water consumption. That's the lesson from European cities.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And over time, we will get there.
I also wanted to acknowledge that, you know, your answer to Councillor de Beermaker, you said two things. One, price by itself hasn't been what's been driving this. It's actually been technological innovation and in previous years, a variety of incentive programs. Am I correct in that?
It's specifically for the city of Toronto?
Yes.
I would say yes. It was a combination of price increases, our efficiency programs that we had in place, and the natural change-out that's happening in the infrastructure that uses water.
Within households and
Within
businesses.
households.
Yes.
It's not just the price.
Yeah.
That was the question.
You gave an example of the province finally capitulating and making what we have been incenting for low-flow toilets the norm. But that low-flow toilet that they adopted, that's nowhere near the efficiency that ultra-low-flow toilets have, is it?
To you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. On the market, you can buy the dual flush toilets or the extreme low flow toilets that are well below the building code level. So there's still improvements that can be made on the building code side, and that will drive greater efficiency. When you look at single-family home or even the type of condominium that we are building today, the toilet remains the largest water use in those types of dwellings.
But there are still efficiency
ways we
measures
can
well
improve.
beyond what's mandated that you could make with showers, that you could make with
That's correct.
any other major household water use. I also wanted to note that, and congratulate you on you're achieving a very good number for electricity used per megaliter of water pumped. But you'd agree, though, that the best way to reduce electricity is not to pump that liter by conservation.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that we had to look at when we were doing that calculation. Was it a true efficiency, or was it, as consumption dropped, I'm just not using as much? So we pulled the two apart, and we found that we were getting a component. As we need less to be produced, I don't spend the electricity, but a bigger component was the efficiency when we're pumping, what the rates are, time of use, et cetera. But there's two components, absolutely.
So if we wanted to go further with the environmental goals of reducing water consumption, which has environmental benefits because we're not having to treat the water on the way in or treat the water on the way out or use electricity to pump it up the hill, we could be incenting, particularly with toilets, but also with other water-consuming devices within households and businesses, we could be incenting something that's available on the market right now, but is much better than building code.
Mr. Chair, the short answer is you could, but you'd have to fund it in your rate model then. You'd have to look at not only the contribution that you want to make, so make sure that's in the budget, you'd also then have to forecast what that consumption drop would be and the impact then to your programs and adjust your rate accordingly.
When was the last time you did any analysis on a program like that to consider whether it was worthwhile?
I believe it was 2010.
2010, so it's been a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I see no other outside councillors. Is there any indication from committee members? Are there any second questions at all from anybody? If not, we can go to Councillor Campbell. You had another question, then we'll open it up for one more round then? Okay.
I would like to follow up on Councillor Perks's questions in regard to consumption. Toronto Hydro bills used to bill every 2 months. They're now billing monthly. How often do we get our water bill? Is it 4 times a year?
Through Mr. Chair, it's 4 times a year, but you can go to monthly, but you have to sign up for the e-pay system.
So when
and I'll make that pitch to you. If you sign up for e-pay, you can pay monthly.
When you get a regular reminder from Toronto Hydro with the comparative, the year-over-year comparisons, I think it's just conjecture, but I think that the average homeowner looks at that and adjusts their behavior accordingly. I don't think the same thing happens with respect to water consumption.
Through you, Mr. Chair, on the billing side, on the actual paper, we do provide some data, but probably not as nicely presented as you see on some other utility bills. I think that's a function of the tool that we have on the billing side. But I will say to you, if you jump on our Toronto Water portal that we created and launched in January of this year, sign your account up, and you can go online and actually trend your daily water consumption, and you can get all of that data, but you have to go online to pull that data.
So why is Toronto Water not being as progressive in terms of marketing the benefits of lower consumption by being more specific about, revealing what water consumption and costs are?
I'm going to have to ask Rob maybe to jump in, because right now the issue on getting that information out and the billing system is really handled by Revenue Services, and I do believe they're looking at improvements for the tax and utility billing systems.
Through Mr. Budget Chair, so we recently did some changes to the billing. We are also looking at modernizing our actual software for bill production because it is actually quite old, and we do have a capital project which sits in the tax budget about looking at and doing some investigations to both our tax billing software and our water billing software and modernizing.
So is the city looking to going to monthly billing or bi-monthly billing for water?
We do have that option already.
But we don't get that.
But you must be on electronic billing.
Right, okay, but if you're not on,
It doesn't pay to do it through the mail and paper-based billing.
it does not
We have
pay.
that now.
Although, okay, so the response is that it's too costly to mail it out on a monthly basis. But would there not be a beneficial trade-off in reduced water consumption if people were adjusting their behaviors accordingly?
That would take some analysis to see if there's an actual impact on that. But also, you can present bills electronically as well, so we will look at what improvements we can do to that as well.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
Thank you, Council. Any other committee members? Seeing none, I guess Councillor Davis, I believe you had another question or two?
One of the other, on page 24, it talks about the cost of construction going up 200 to 300%. And I know you turned down contracts last year because of it. And have we looked at all at whether or not an in-house construction capacity to do some ongoing work like water main relining and water main replacements might be a more effective, cost-effective way to deliver this program? Have we looked at all when these contracts are coming in so high?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't looked for a number of years, but we did look at it several years ago, and the conclusions were it would require significant capital investment on our part
Right.
to get all of the equipment that we would need to do the work. We'd have to hire more staff,
Okay.
obviously, and we need more yards. So once you start layering on all of that, it was not competitive to going to the market and getting a tendered price.
It might be now.
This was only
But
for a
this-
small group of projects that we saw.
Yeah.
And in particular, it was in relation to sewer projects.
No, I'm-
And sewer projects in the downtown where we saw costing jump significantly. On water mains, the price was higher than previous years, but it did come down. So when we retendered, we did see some adjustment in the marketplace. For some reason, sewer projects remain higher.
Okay, the water meter program, you still show the water meter program in the capital plan as being quite significant, and I just want to know where we're at. Hasn't the water meter program been completed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is completed. We still are in the final stages of clearing up all the bills and the warranty, so there's some monies required to close out the capital project, but it is not significant anymore. There's a few $1 million in the program still, but it's substantially complete. And in fact, that program returned, I believe, close to $50 to $60 million back to our reserve as being not needed and unspent.
But it shows it on the chart still as quite significant.
No, it shouldn't be. I know
On page 30,
I'm on 30.
it says water efficiency and metering, so
Oh, so that would
what's
be
in
a
the-
bundle. So that's a bundling together of a variety of different services that we provide. It's not just the water meter, so.
it goes up in 2018, 19, and 20 significantly.
So this would be some other programs that we're doing. We just,
Like?
it's all just bundled together.
Like what? What is it that's so big in that blue
Steve?
bar?
Steve? He's got the details.
I'm looking at page 30, the slide on page 30.
I can't hear you. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
I can basically,
There.
On this
there,
slide here.
That one. So
Actually-
the blue bar is water meter
At
and
the bottom?
efficiency.
No, at the bottom, that's plants.
Oh, Okay, you should change your blues.
I try to every day.
I love the blues, but... And can I just say finally, could I get a briefing on the wet weather flow implementation as compared to the 2003 master plan timelines?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have in our work plan in 2017 to give an update on that program. So there will be a more detailed report coming. If you could wait to then, our staff are still working on it.
Because I think
We're-
we've
we are
shifted
looking.
a lot of...
We're giving the 5-year update. We give updates in 5-year increments.
We've shifted a lot of money into the basement flooding program, I think,
Well,
understandably, but
just to be clear, though, within the wet weather flow program, basement flooding was a component of it.
Yes,
It
but
just was a
not-
very small component.
Yes, exactly.
It grew considerably, but it
And
was
I'm
always
glad you
part
s-
of it.
Thank you, Council. That's your last question.
I just
That's your
want
last,
lead water.
Councillor, that's your last question. You are over.
Are we just spending as much on lead water service replacements?
Thank you,
in this
Councillor.
budget?
We're going to go to, we've already had a second round,
Consistent.
Councillor. We're going to, no, Councillor
Consistently
Perks
the
is
same.
next.
Could you answer Councillor Davis's question?
Yeah, there's always ways around it, I
Thank you,
know.
brother.
If your question was about lead, we're spending the same amount in our programs, and it could be more if we're doing more water main replacement work. We're changing out the lead services as we're doing water main replacement. And our on-demand programs remain in place, and that's completely driven by the demand from households.
So you said that you're spending the same. Are you, are you?
Or more, depending if we're doing more water main
I'm-
replacement.
Oh, Lou, let me ask before you answer.
Sorry. Trying to keep in touch with you.
We're doing good, we're doing good. Are you budgeting the same as you budgeted last year, or are you budgeting to spend the actual that you spent last year?
Through you, I think for 2017, it's a slight increase as we're doing more water main replacement, but over time,
For the lead?
and the lead is tied directly to water main
Yes.
replacement. So we marry up the.
No, I appreciate it. I just,
that
if you
service.
could, is your 16 to 17?
I can get you the specific numbers on water main.
Somebody in the room will know. 16 to 17,
Annette?
is your budget the same as the budget, or are you budgeting the actuals for 16?
I don't know, if I had my binder with me, I could give you that number, but Annette's got it. She'll get it right now. I left my binder at my seat.
The pressure.
And the actual spending in 20...
I know, Janet, I'm getting to it my way. I'm getting to it my way.
30% of budget. It was well under... He's chatting.
That's what we're missing. We don't have a Works Committee member in our
We are budgeting it's closer to what we are in fact actually spending.
So next question then. So given that you spent about 30% of your budgeted amount on lead service replacements in 16, you're actually reducing your budgeted amount by quite a substantial amount year over year, aren't you?
Check that number. I think we spent more than 30% of the services.
How much did you spend then?
Sorry? How much, what was the complete?
Maybe I should just go over there.
Yeah. Well, if I had my white binder, I could answer, but I don't.
Sorry, through you, Lou, perhaps. We are forecasting to spend about 80% of the water service repair program for 2016, and the 2017 number is in excess of that 80% value.
Okay.
So if
We'll
we-
be pursuing this. We'll
Yeah,
be
if we were looking at I put forward a recent report, and
We didn't get to debate.
and what we had to look at is the combination
I know,
between the on-demand programs and the lead services that were completed. And some of the amounts were deferred in the 2015 years because we canceled a number of tenders that would have completed lead services as we deferred water mains. So that's where you saw a drop in the amount actually spent and completed was the 2015 year with some carryover into 2016. We're back on track again with our tendering, and we're going to achieve the targets that we had.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lou, thank you very much. I appreciate the time you spent on this, and I'm looking forward to a bit more. Okay, we're going to go on next to solid waste, and I'd like to welcome the new director or general manager of solid waste, Jim McKay.
That's yours. I've got everything finished.
There we are.
Again, Jim, welcome to the Budget Committee, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present my first budget to the city. Hopefully not my last. Yeah, we'll know soon enough. So this is the 2017 recommended operating budget and capital plan budget, as well as the recommended solid waste rates for 2017. Just a quick overview. I'll walk you through the program as it stands today, some of our performance from 2016, a small discussion on what 2017 and some of the future outlook looks like for the division itself, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation, which will be on the operating and capital budget financials. As a quick overview, these are the various components of the solid waste management division. Starting right at the very top is promotion and education, working through generation, collections, transfer, recycling, residual. We've got enforcement, we've got financing, and I put this graphic up just to give an understanding that we do a lot more than just collect garbage, and I'm sure you all know that already, but to kind of frame the context of just how expansive the division is. And it's also subject to a number of internal and external pressures at any given time. And you'll see some of those pressures reflected in the presentation today that we are in fact dealing with, some in a good way, some in a negative way. The organization chart is basically the same as the one you saw last year. The only difference are some names in the various boxes, including the one at the top. Service accomplishments in 2016. So just overall, probably one of the largest projects, or one of the larger projects, is the rollout of the second generation green bin, which has been going fantastic so far. Scarborough is done, Etobicoke is almost done, and will be moving into the north end later this year. We've got about 160,000 of those containers out on the street, and to date, speaking of that, to date, we have not had one raccoon incident, touch wood. We've got a new front end. The squirrels occasionally get in, but no raccoons. The front end contract for GFL, so we have a new contractor for all of our front end collections, which is primarily multi-residential customers, started in July. A bit of a rocky start, which is sometimes to be expected with a new contractor coming on board, but that is for the most part smoothed out now and working very well. We're just shy of a million tons all in that we manage through the system on an annual basis. About 162,000 tons are recyclables, which actually creates a value back into the system around $21 million. In addition to curbside collection, we also do large special events, smaller special events, and then in terms of some of the things that we've accomplished over the last year, we've got our new long-term waste management strategy, which really helps set a framework for the division today and where we're looking to go in the future. The Dufferin Organics Processing Facility, the contract to expand that facility was both awarded and construction is already underway. We've got a new 10-year sustainable rate model to help understand better what our financial situation is and plan for future financial needs. And then finally, as you can see in the graphic in the bottom, probably the most successful campaign that the division has rolled out is our Bad Things campaign, where we're up well over 1 million hits now and views to help our residents understand the importance of proper sorting of their recyclable materials as a way to reduce our overall cost to the division each year. Staffing trends, a quick slide. You'll see a bit of a blip from 2011 to 2012. That's when the contracting out occurred. But basically, I think the message here is our program has grown by about 15% since 2012, since after the contracting out, and our staff complement has actually declined by 2%. So over the last number of years, we've done a lot more with actually fewer staff, which I think is a good news story. We've been able to find a lot of efficiencies, remove some of the vacancies that we were carrying, and just deliver a larger program with fewer number of people. On our vacancies still remains a bit of a challenge for the division. It's traditionally has been a challenge for the division. I'll draw your attention to the table at the top, the bottom right-hand corner of that table. So our vacancies are actually coming down year over year. We've gone from as high last year at 10.8% vacancies down to 6.9%. Some of the discussion with Lou previously around difficulty to fill positions, we are in that same boat, and in some cases with the same types of positions. Skilled trades are very difficult to fill right now, so that is part of our vacancies. And then, surprisingly enough, our solid waste collection operators, those are the actual drivers. These are DZ licensed drivers, but they are now specialized drivers as well because we've moved to automated fleets. So it's more than just driving an air licensed truck down the street. We're having difficulty filling those positions, as is the industry. This is not just us, the private sector or other municipalities with fleets. Everybody's having problems filling these positions right now, and we've taken a number of steps. We work closely now with driver training institutes to be able to recruit directly out of the programs to try and bring staff in. Of that 77 year-end projection for 2016 vacancies at 6.9%, the other thing to recognize in solid waste is we have quite a heavy turnover rate internally on a pretty frequent basis of our frontline staff. So at any given time, we can have 40 to 50 positions that are just constantly being emptied and filled, emptied and filled, emptied and filled. And that's because, and it's largely our collection operators. Solid waste, I think, to be fair, has become a bit of a training ground for these types of operators. They'll get a few years under their belt as licensed DZ operators, and then they seem to vacate and go to other places. I think part of that is simply the stigma of being a garbage collector, although they are specialized DZ operators. So we're working through that, and as you can see, our numbers are actually coming down. So we're in much better shape than what we have been previously. A few thoughts on where we're at today and where we need to go. As the new guy coming into the division, I thought I'd share just a few thoughts on what I've seen coming in over the last 6 months and some of the challenges as we've gone through this budgeting process to really break down the numbers and understand where we're at. Vehicle maintenance has been underfunded, and that has resulted in deteriorating assets and infrastructure on our collection side of things. And for each one of these, I don't want to sound doom and gloom. We do have a plan to fix these, and those are written into the 2017 budget submission. The financial impact of some of the new and modified programs over time has not been directly attributed to some of our customer types. So what has happened is that we've rolled out new programs or services to certain types of customers, and the cost associated has not been directly attributed to that customer class. It has been borne by our entire customer base. And ultimately what has happened is we are not operating at a full cost recovery for the services that we are providing. So there's some degree of internal subsidies where we are, to give you the best example, we are rolling out organics programs in some cases, but we are not charging an additional fee now for those organics. That is just being borne by the system overall. And it's sort of a common theme that I've seen since I've started is that we need to get more to a full cost recovery model where customers are actually paying for the cost of the services that they are receiving. And that's where you'll see the difference, and when we get into the rate discussion, why their rates are changing and variable based on the customer type, where we talk about a blended rate. That is to help, in essence, true up our costs to make sure that our customers are actually paying for the costs of the services that they are receiving. We're one of the unique divisions where we're also exposed to commodity market fluctuations because we do sell materials into the commodity markets. The commodity markets are down for the majority of our recyclable materials right now. So as those markets decline, it's actually a net reduction in our revenue stream into the division. And I think just a final point is there has been some short-term financial decision-making that has resulted in some long-term financial instability and risk. And that's why we're bringing forward this longer-term plan that I'll be presenting to you today. So on the upside, what are we going to do about it? So first of all, we need to stabilize our operations. We need to do a true-up on our fleet. Our fleet is not in a state where it needs to be, which is causing service disruptions and even potential safety issues. So I'll talk to that in a minute. As I mentioned, we need to realign better with our customers, so we're actually allocating costs appropriately to the customers and the services that they were receiving. We've got to right-size our revenue model. We are still somewhat dependent on the tax base, which I'd like to see over time phased out. We need a long-term look. So I will be presenting to you a 10-year capital plan, but what we've also prepared is a 30-year capital plan, because some of the infrastructure and some of the investments that we have to make are actually past that 10-year period, but we need to be accounting for them today so we are prepared to make those investments at the time we get there. We need to level the playing field, and by that I mean there is some loopholes in the system right now where some of our multi-residential clients or customers can leave our system. We are not mandated by the province to collect from multi-residential customers, and in some cases they do so basically to avoid their environmental obligations. If they are on our system, they are required to separate all three streams. They've got to have garbage, recycling, and green bin. If they leave our system, they can downgrade to just straight garbage, and that's what's happening to it. So by leveling the playing field, I mean we need to look at proper bylaws and procedures in concert with the province, who is also looking at this issue right now. And it's not to say that we're going to force everyone to use our services, but we need to make sure that the playing field is level so that they are not avoiding their environmental obligations by simply leaving our system. We need to explore some alternatives to service delivery and procurement of services, which will be a discussion coming up in the near future on, are there other ways that we could be delivering our services? And the simplest example is through the long-term strategy, we identified textiles as one of the next big opportunities to reduce the amount of waste that we're producing. There's already not-for-profit organizations who are managing those materials. Rather than the city taking on the responsibility for doing that, is there another way to deliver that service where we become a partner or an enabler to another non-charitable organization, for example? So looking through a slightly different lens on how we deliver services to our customers. And then finally, probably one of the biggest opportunities is investing in some of the green technologies that are available out there. These are either new opportunities from a technology perspective or new legislation that's being put in place in the province. Renewable natural gas is probably the biggest one on our list right now, where we are generating an energy product from both our landfill sites in the form of the methane that we capture, the landfill gas that we capture, and also from our anaerobic digestion technologies that we have. That is a product that has a value, has significant value in some cases, and we are currently flaring that and exhausting it into the atmosphere. We could be capturing that and injecting it back into the pipeline as a future revenue stream. So you'll see some of these ideas coming forward in this budget where a relatively small capital investment could have a significant long-term revenue stream attached to it. One final slide on the overview. So we have our long-term waste management strategy that was approved by Council in July. Several years worth of work and thousands of participants involved through the stakeholder consultation that we completed on that project. This is a little bit of a unique long-term strategy because it is heavily focused on the front end. You know, I always kind of frame it as front-of-pipe solutions and end-of-pipe solutions. You can either manage waste or you can prevent its generation in the first place. And the most efficient and most effective way of reducing costs in a waste management system is not to produce it in the first place. So you'll see in the strategy itself is more emphasis on working with our customers and working with our residents to reduce the amount of waste that they're producing, reuse some of those materials on the front end so that we as a city don't actually have to manage those and incur the cost that we then have to translate back to our customers. You'll see also in there in the strategy, piloting of mixed waste processing. Again, that's to look at, in particular, some of our multi-residential customers to increase diversion. And then the enhanced promotion education, and where the promotion and education doesn't work, look at more aggressive enforcement activities. This long-term strategy is really a framework, so there's a lot of different pieces that reside within this framework, and I just wanted to flag a few things around what would happen if we didn't have this strategy. Thank you. Or what would the future look like without the strategy and the different pieces that we're looking at implementing. As I said, there's a lot of front-of-pipe solutions, reduction, reuse. The equivalent of conservation in a water budget is prevention and reuse in a solid waste budget. we wouldn't get up to the diversion rates that we're being tasked with achieving. We wouldn't be able to research these technologies. And I think one of the biggest things and one of the focus in the long-term strategy was maximizing the life of the Green Lane landfill as our asset. That is probably our most important asset. I'm biased, but I would say for the city, it's probably in our top list of our most important assets moving forward, maximizing the lifespan of that asset as long as we can, and the best way to do that is to keep material out of it. And now the budget. So some of the challenges, and I spoke to a few of these already, fleet repair and replacement is a challenge. We've got a fairly significant portion of our division is now contracted out, and we've got contract terms with escalation clauses built into that, so we have to take that into account. We have single-family residential downsizing their bins, which is good from an environmental perspective, not necessarily so good from a financial perspective for the division. We have a gradual loss of multi-residential customers to private operators, as I spoke to before, and then the declining prices for recyclable materials is becoming a problem. The opportunities, a much more sustainable rate model, planning of new programs in 3Rs, and enhancing the existing programs. The philosophy, part of the philosophy behind the long-term strategy is we've already made a lot of really good long-term capital investments in terms of infrastructure and technology for the city to operate. We now need to maximize the use of those programs and services and facilities and spend the money on maximizing what we already have versus going out and building something new is one of the underlying philosophies. And then we've got an opportunity now with the strategy, now that we've got a vision and a focus as to where we're going to go, to start to realign some of our staffing needs to meet what that future looks like. In terms of our base budget, slides similar to what you would have seen from Lou. On the gross expenditures, we've actually color-coded these slides. Councillor Carroll was asking us before. So the color coding is red is bad, green is good. So unfortunately on our opening slide, it's all red. And what I mean by that is our gross expenditures are going up by 3.9%, and I'll show you a breakout of each one of these. Our revenues are dropping by 2.6%. So overall, we've got a 6.6% pressure. We need to contribute more to our reserves. We've done a lot of financial modeling to understand what our future needs are, so we now know what we need to be contributing to our reserves to accommodate that. So overall, when you add it up as purely as the base budget without any sort of changes or modifications over last year, we're at an 8.2% pressure. This is basically how the various expenditures are split out within the division. You can see services and rents down at the bottom right is around 35%. Salaries and benefits is fairly significant. The one item that I do want to highlight on this graph is that 37 million, almost 10% of our budget is based on debt charges. So you'll see in the budget that we're putting forward today, one of the things that we're looking at doing is moving to a much more sustainable utility-based model where we avoid these future debt charges in the future and really become more financially sustainable. So this is the detail on the expenditures, and just a few things to highlight. So economic factors are going up. That's roughly $2 million just in salaries and benefits changes. You can see some of the higher numbers here. So our collection contracts, just based on escalation clauses alone, are going up around 2.3 million, and based on our budget terms, around between 2.3 and 2.5 million is roughly a 1% increase on the rate. Some of the other higher ones, internal charges is actually one of the higher numbers going up, so that's the services that we receive from all of our other partners within the city, and that includes fleet, which is part of our challenge. Those are sort of the highlights, I think, to take away on the expenditure side. In terms of our revenue, you can see the majority of it comes from the user fees. We do get some revenues from other sources, so stewardship funding, for example, that we get through the extended producer responsibility model here in the province of Ontario for the sale of recyclable materials and the management of recyclable materials. The roughly 21 million that we get for the sale of recyclables. We do manage some private tons through our transfer station, and there's a tipping fee that's associated with that. But as you can see, the majority of the recovery comes through our rates. In terms of our revenues, a few things to highlight on this slide for you. Again, this is all based on what it looked like compared to last year's budget. Or a couple things that I'll highlight for you is the Green Lane operations and redirecting waste from Green Lane. This is something that was recommended in the long-term strategy, is to actually divert a portion of our tons away from Green Lane to private sector landfill sites. And the philosophy behind this is that they, from an environmental perspective, they are just as good as what we are. So we're not compromising any environmental issues. What we are doing is maximizing the life of our landfill site. And financially, over time, it actually makes good business sense. If they can landfill it for less than what we can save our landfill site by simply sending it to other locations. So that is a concept that was built into the strategy that was approved in July. You can also see, you know, we're losing our rate revenues are going down from the sale of recyclable materials, so that's an impact. And so that, unfortunately, is simply a commodity market issue, which we have very little ability to influence. In terms of new or enhanced or service changes, we're adding, or we're recommending adding one additional enforcement person, and that will be a direct liaison with our friends in MLS to work on a much more aggressive enforcement strategy moving forward. One of the things that we're looking at doing is piloting a biweekly green bin collection in the winter season. So this is a pilot. We are by no means recommending this citywide right now, but in areas like Scarborough, where we've already rolled out the larger green bins, in the months of January, February, March, there's certainly capacity in there to be able to manage 2 weeks worth of material, and when it's cold, it doesn't smell. So what we do want to try is a pilot which has and see exactly what types of efficiencies we can realize by going to a biweekly schedule through the winter months on our green bin collection. And even through just a small pilot program, you can see we're estimating we can save around $200,000 a year. And then successful completion of the charity rate waiver program. So a number of years ago, there was a program set up to review charities and basically waive their rate that they would be required to pay. That program is, from all intents and purposes, successfully completed now. So we're going to be closing it down. And by closing it down, I mean we're going to keep one staff who will still continue to work with the charities. The majority of the charities have all signed up and have their rates waived. Those who did not will be basically grandfathered in and will waive their rates. In the end, what we were doing was spending around $700,000 to recoup $300,000. So there's actually a negative cost to the city to just administer a program. So it's actually cheaper for us to just let everyone have this service and continue to work with them. One slide that I wanted to flag for you, committed versus variable expenses. So as I mentioned, a number of our expense line items are already committed through contractual arrangements, interdivisional charges, debt charges. We have very little ability right now to influence these. So you can see, you know, roughly 151 million or so of our total budget is variable. And that includes our reserve contributions, which I would argue should not be a variable expense line item. But just to put this into perspective, this is sort of the situation. So when we talk about service efficiencies, there's really a small portion of the overall budget that we can actually influence right now. Some cost recovery measures. What we're looking at doing is implementing a charge for oversized items, and I'll get into some of these in more detail in subsequent slides. A charge for special event cleanups and a bin exchange fee. The bin exchange fee is right now if a customer decides to upsize their bin, we charge them a nominal fee to go out and replace that bin with a larger bin. If a customer wants to downsize their bin, we do not charge them, but we provide the exact same level of service where we send a special truck out with a new bin and do that exchange on your doorstep. So what we're proposing is a bin exchange fee regardless of whether you're upsizing or downsizing. This is an at-your-door service that we're providing, so there will be a charge moving forward for it. You'll see a savings in terms of service efficiencies because we've started to move our fleet to compressed natural gas vehicles. There's actually a significant fuel savings that we're going to realize in 2017 because the price of natural gas is considerably cheaper, in the neighborhood of around $775,000 less on our fuel price tag to run our collection fleet. And then additional revenue generation, which is the rate increase that's being recommended. To get in a couple of these in a little bit more detail. So This is a charge for oversized items. What we're proposing is a flat $8 per household annual fee that would be required, that would be added to each person's bill year over year. This is, to give you an example of this picture, this is an apartment, yes, so a household or unit or residential unit. So it'll be included in residential units, multi-residential, and single family. So an $8 fee. To give you an example, so that cleanup alone, just in that picture, is roughly a $700 cost to go out and clean up that. So what we're simply trying to do is recover some of our costs. If we did not provide that service to the customers, they would have to go get somebody or hire somebody to come in, and the cost would be significantly more than what we are proposing here. Again, this is the concept of moving towards more of a cost recovery measure to ensure that we are recouping the cost for the services that we are providing. The base fee for commercial bag-only customers. Again, right now, the way these commercial bag-only customers work is they pay a fee for that bag or the tag, and then all the other services, the green bin and the blue bin, are free of charge, essentially. The cost of those services is rolled into the price, supposedly, for the bag that's being received. Again, to give you a picture, and this, it looks extreme, it's actually not in some cases. The price that this customer would pay is $6.78 for that set out. In reality, it costs about $57 to service that one set out at one time. So again, what we're trying to do is make sure that our customers who are receiving these services understand and are paying for the full cost of the service that they are getting. And then the final one is a charge for special event cleanup. So when people apply for a permit, largely through transportation services, to have a special event, there's a permit, there are various fees that are associated with that. What we're looking at doing is adding a solid waste fee onto that as well, which is part of the cleanup fee. Some of these events are large. There's large quantities of waste that are collected. It requires literally, 10 to 15 trucks and crews to go up and down these streets to clean up, both in advance of, during, and after these events. So what we're looking at doing is recovering those costs. One of the challenges with this is because we are a rate-based program, it's only our rate payers who are actually covering the cost of this service, when in fact these special events contribute to the entire city and in some cases the Greater Toronto Area. So what we're trying to do is take the burden off of the specific customers of ours for these citywide or in much cases larger initiatives that are part of the city. So that's the operating budget. On the capital side, this is the assets that we have in place today. Transfer stations, organics processing facilities, our collections yards. We have Green Lane, which is our one and only open landfill. We've got 160 closed landfills, which continue to have a fairly significant price tag associated with maintaining those year over year, and roughly 775 vehicles and pieces of equipment. Some of the challenges here, ensuring adequate processing capacity for all materials. There is becoming a shortage as people produce more and more material. We need to make sure that we have right-sized our processing capacity to be able to accommodate that in the future. Maintaining our state of good repair of facilities, escalating contractor costs similar to some of the issues that Lou has been having. Improving our spend rate on the capital. It's certainly much better than it has been over previous years. And then uncertainty around the future legislation in Ontario. Every time we make a decision around what future capital investment we make, we have to take into account what the future legislation in Ontario, which is pending right now, and will that investment be a good investment should the approach to managing blue bin material in particular in the city and in the province change in the future. As I mentioned, biogas is a huge opportunity for investment. Our asset management program has been developing significantly over the last year, so we have a much better understanding of our program so that we can make data-based decisions, which is extremely important in our business, and completing the rollout. In terms of the capital budget, $105 million, and you can see, some of those are sort of year over year, like, continuing to develop cells at the Green Lane landfill, perpetual care of our closed landfills, and then, transfer station asset management, those sorts of things. A few things to highlight in our capital budget plan for 10 years. You can see the Green Lane landfill, which is legislated, the Dufferin source-separated organics facility, which is under construction right now. That's our largest capital project by far. And then our diversion bins, that's essentially the rollout of the Green Bin 2.0 right now. Is that my cue to stop talking? Just a couple more slides for you. This is sort of the breakout of what our capital plan looks like. The one thing I would highlight here are two things. First of all, service improvements. Things like rolling out the new Green Bin is actually coded as a service improvement here, and that's a $22 million price tag unto itself. So it sounds like we're rolling out new services. We're not really. It's just the way it's coded in the system. You'll also see a rather significant decline over the next number of years in terms of what our actual capital plan is. That's in large part because we've made a lot of capital investments over the last 10 years, and we can start to realize that we don't have to make those big capital investments. But again, this presents an opportunity because our capital expenditures are going to be lower to start building our reserves back up again. And I'll show you a slide in a minute on that. So here's what everyone's probably interested in. This is the proposed rate increase, or the recommended rate increase. A blended 3.9% across all customer groups. And as I mentioned, we call it blended because it does increase and decrease based on the customer type. But overall, it's 3.9%. To put that into context, because it sounds like a lot, but for a single-family residential building with a small bin, that increase is the equivalent of 24 cents a week increase on their rate for the next year. So that's the rate increase that's being proposed. What does that support? So it supports, for the most part, our capital program, which includes the Dufferin expansion, landfill cell development at Green Lane, and other capital projects that we have on go, and then an operating impact of an additional maintenance cost of $2.5 million for the aging fleet that we have. So our fleet maintenance costs are going to continue to rise until we have the ability to get new trucks in and deal with that. This is just a quick graph to show you where we are at from a fleet perspective. So the kind of pinky orange color is roughly where a fleet should be in terms of operating age, somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range. We've been pushing our trucks out as much as we can out into the 7-year range. You can see our current fleet, 73% of the current fleet is now in a stage where it should be replaced. And given that it's roughly a 2-year window from the point of order to actually receiving, by the time we were to receive those trucks, they'd be 9 years old. So the additional maintenance costs that we're going to be paying in 2017, that is a burden that will continue and increase in future years until we can replace the fleet. We have come up with a plan to deal with that, which is in this budget to true up the fleet. That is a plan that is very sensitive of the fact that there is going to be a future discussion on, that didn't happen last year, on contracting out waste collection services east of Yonge. So what we're coming up with is a plan that is cognizant of that discussion so that we're not making big investments that may be overridden, but at the same time we need to be making investments so that we can continue delivering the services that we deliver. This is where our reserve is at right now. We're sitting at around 115 million. As you can see, there's a rather significant drawdown over the next couple of years. And what this rate increase supports in part is to move forward and start to rebuild that reserve up to around 132 million by 2026. And that's important because our big capital investments are not going to come in the next 10 years, other than the ones we're completing out now. It's in the 11 to 20-year window where we're going to have some major capital investments, which could include the mixed waste processing facility, additional residual capacity if we do have to move forward with an expansion of Green Lane or new disposal capacity somewhere else. And based on the tonnages of organics that are being created in that window, we'll also probably have to look at a third anaerobic digestion facility with another $100 million price tag associated with it. So this is really about our reserve is being drawn down. We need to start to build that back up. So again, we're in a financially sustainable position so that we can, when we need to make those capital investments, we can do that. The other part of this to flag for you is the plan is based on 0% net debt funded capital projects by 2019. So what that means is rather than borrowing money in the future for capital projects, we build up a reserve such that there's sufficient money there so that we don't have to continue borrowing money over and over again to build this new infrastructure. And we can do that by taking advantage of the fact that we don't have to spend a lot today. Final slide. I'm sure, as you all know, there is also a rebate program that's attached to the solid waste budget. This is certainly dealt with through the tax-supported budget, and we'll be coming back to you as part of that program. And what we'll be proposing is a multi-year rebate reduction plan. This is a trend that has happened over the last couple of years where we slowly reduce the rebate to essentially wean the solid waste division off of the tax base. We'll be putting forward a plan as part of the tax base budget so that we have a multi-year plan that lays out the process and the approach that we're proposing to move this forward so that everyone understands exactly what the long-term phase-out looks like. And at the end of the day, the goal is to have a program set up similar to what Toronto Water is right now, where it's a standalone rate-based utility program. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate that. We'll go to questions of committee members first. Committee members' questions. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, so in terms of overall efficiency, thank you for the explanation of red is bad and green is good. Well, it's captured in a couple of slides, but Green for Life is now delivering two kinds of collection contract for us, both multi-res and single-family Zone 1. Processing contracts are a range of other different companies, are they not?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they are.
So I note that while all contracts have an inflationary clause, we seem to be we seem to have less cost pressure from the processing contracts. I think they were at 0.2% cost pressure, and the collection contracts are 0.8% cost pressure for us. How do they have a different approach to inflation, those processing contracts?
Well, and some of those pressures are more than just escalation. So they all have for the most part, they're all similar escalation clauses based on CPI. Part of the contract, the collection contract pressure is we actually have a new collection contract. And that collection contract, the new GFL multi-residential contract, is more expensive than the previous Miller contract that was bid. I think it was an 8 or a 10-year contract previously.
But it was the lowest bidder.
They were still the lowest bidder, yes. But they are relatively more expensive. So that is part of the pressure on the collection side.
And that is more, am I right in thinking that's more a matter of Miller, who was delivering it before, was kind of delivering it at a cost that was too low for them even? They were under pressure.
Yes, they were under pressure, but fortunately we had a contract with a set price and they delivered it for that price, yes.
So we now have the Zone 1 contract, which has how many years in it, plus the new contract, multi-res has how many years in it?
The new multi-res contract is a 10-year contract.
10, not a 7, okay. And how many years left?
If I can, it's a 10-year contract, and the reason for a slightly longer term on the contract is it actually allows for essentially 2 5-year contracts within one contract term, and that is a sufficient timeline to allow them to move to CNG vehicles, which in the end will actually reduce not only our financial impact, but also our environmental impact.
Right, right. And how much left in the curbside Zone 1 contract?
Zone 1, 2 years? I'm looking at Rob.
It started last year, 2015, and it was a 6-year contract with 2 one-year options.
Okay. So they have options to renew, but so long as we have these programs, they have a 2% inflationary escalator on them. Is that a global based on the total year's cost, or just on the curbside actors themselves? Does the 2% get applied across the board, their admin, their vehicles, their everything?
That's my understanding, but I'll check with our financial folks over here.
So we have a pretty large amount of fixed costs here. So we can apply efficiency targets to across the city, except that we can't really apply them here. You have about 2/3 of the budget. I'm eyeballing the number. Have that fixed escalation cost. So while they may be looking for efficiencies themselves, that's within their company. We don't get to apply them to our budget.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's one of the pressures and one of the reasons we have to do here. Some of the changes, some of the service changes are asking us to apply charges where we haven't in the past. Large articles I'm particularly concerned about. We want to get those. We want to come and get them and make sure they end up in the right stream. But are we not, if we apply a charge, we're not going to just see large article illegal dumping. Why would I call you to say, please charge me, when I could just get a couple of teenagers to take that washing machine to the end of the block?
I think what the important aspect is, this is a multi-pronged approach. So we apply a fee to cover our costs for providing this service. And part of the background on this additional enforcement activities is to make sure that we also target illegal dumping, so that the negative effect of applying an additional fee on some of these items is you can potentially see an increase in illegal dumping. So we need the enforcement activities on the same side, as well as the education, to make sure that we don't see an offset.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interrupt, it's a base fee. It's not a per call or pickup fee.
Correct. It is a base fee.
Maybe we need to know a little more about that in future presentations, because I can see misinformation abounding pretty quickly here. The other one is on green bin changeouts. Okay, well, someone else is probably going to ask about the changeout fee.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned a reserve set up for the fleet. How much for the aging fleet of trucks? What's that amount?
Well, we're proposing a one-time true-up, which is roughly $18 million. And that would
and that's for 2017?
That's for 2017.
18 million?
Yes.
And that's to go toward purchase of new trucks? Or?
That's to go towards the purchase of approximately 60 new trucks.
How many?
60.
60, okay.
Yes.
How do we know we're going to need those?
We know that we need them now, but based on the timing of when all this occurs, we have a future contracting out discussion coming as well.
So what if that goes well and that occurs?
Well, that depends on your definition of well.
I guess that's true. Let me just leave it. What if that occurs?
If portions of District 3 and/or District 4 were to be contracted out in the future, we would build that into the true-up scenario to make sure that we're not investing in vehicles that would then be surplused a year and a half or 2 years later. There's a way to be able to do this so that if say, one district was to be contracted out before the other as part of a phased approach, then we have the ability to redeploy some trucks into the other districts so that we can still maximize the investment into that fleet without getting into a situation where we've invested in a lot of trucks that we'll have to surplus at high depreciation rates, and it'd actually be a poor financial situation for the city to be in.
All right, so, okay, just switching gears a bit. The pilot project for the green bin, $200,000 savings, how many households is that in Scarborough?
Scarborough has 120,000 and Etobicoke.
What for the pilot?
Pilot, 120,000.
120,000 households, okay. So the $8 charge for large pickup, I'm wondering, if as a resident, I think there might be a tendency to, first of all, that's a charge that's going to be $8 if it's approved going for next year, and that's a charge that'll increase probably every year. And I can see residents being rather annoyed if they're not putting out, and they're paying for something that they're not putting out. Why wasn't that just blended into the overall rates?
Well, we wanted to basically highlight the fact that this is somewhat of an additional service that is comparable in other areas, and added in as a flat fee, because we don't necessarily know if it will increase with the other rates.
So chances everything goes up.
We added in as a flat fee, and the reality is, I think, based on what we see out on the street every day, everyone at some point will use this service and put out some sort of large item that requires collection.
Well, and then it may also encourage people to put out things that they might not otherwise, because they say, what the heck, I'm paying for it, I might as well get rid of more stuff at the curbside. I mean, has that been thought of? I mean, I just don't know why it wasn't just put into the regular blended rate. Was that discussed?
We did discuss it, and based on what we looked at, we thought including it as a flat fee moving forward would be a better option.
Okay, then we're also proposing to charge for bin exchange. So while we want to encourage people to downsize or upsize on their recycled bins and downsize on their garbage, we're now going to hit them with an extra fee. Why is that? Because we want people to recycle more and not put out more garbage, but now we're going to penalize them for it.
We do, but this applies to all bins, so this would include the garbage bins as well. And again, this is a special service that we provide, and we need to start recovering the cost for these special at-your-door services. If we were to take this cost and blend it into the overall rate, then what we would be doing is actually financially impacting those who are not continually switching bins in and out.
But again, is it not, I mean, is it not seen that this will discourage, you know, what's the proposed fee for the bin exchange?
I believe it's around roughly $25.
Yes. $25. Well, you know, all right, that's all I have. I mean, my personal view is it should be just blended into the rates and just, because these are just other little nuggets that will go up on an annual basis and people will just resent even more. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Councillor Nunziata.
I did hear on Councillor Campbell's question. So what is the cost for us to go in and exchange a bin to someone's home?
Currently, if you're going to upsize your bin, it's $25.
That's how much it costs us to get somebody in a vehicle and walk and drive to their home?
That's the fee that we levy right now, right? Yes.
Why is it $25?
That's based on the modeling that when that charge was put into place, that was the estimate on how much it would cost to do that. We don't do them one at a time. We have the ability to cycle them and route them so that we can do multiple ones at a time.
So it would probably be cheaper if the councillors delivered them, right? Just give them to us and we can deliver them, just like we do our signs and just like we do everything else, right?
Through you, Chair, that is the cost of our contractor. So it is a full recovery cost fee that we are applying to the resident for the exchange of the fee. So it is to cover the cost that our contractor charges us to execute that task.
So you hire a contractor to deliver these bins?
Through you, the Chair,
Like a
this is
special
the contract.
We can't do them ourselves?
This is the contractor that we have to provide bins to our residents. So it's part of the overall contract that we have with our vendor for the supply of bins.
It's crazy. So for this $8 fee that you want to charge everyone, looking at this picture you have on page 21, it looks like this apartment building, and I have a lot of them in my ward too, in rooming houses, where they don't care. They just throw out these bulk items on the curb, on the sidewalk every week. So they're just throwing them out, even though it's not being collected. So this is all an enforcement, because what happens when we have to keep calling enforcement to go out? Why are we not penalizing these people that are doing this and adding the cost onto the property tax rather than charging everybody $8 a year when they're not throwing their bulk items on the curb?
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I can clarify, this would actually be considered a legal set-out. This is a set-out for bulk collection purposes in a properly, it's huge, so it's spread out all over the place.
It doesn't look like it's proper. It looks like it's just been dumped, and that's what I see in my ward every day. That's just dumping.
So this is, what we define as illegal dumping is, and I'll get Tracy to give me the exact answer, but illegal dumping is when you take a material and put it on somebody else's property or our property illegally. This is setting out a large amount of material for a bulk collection. What probably happened in this building was they had, end of the month, they had a bunch of move-outs, a lot of stuff got thrown into a big pile. What we're trying to do with this $8 fee is, we recognize this, there's a significant cost to the division to actually have to go out and clean this up. It's not an enforcement issue. It's not as though we can go in and fine them because they're not technically doing anything wrong.
Well, okay, what happens to the residential or even business that they put out this these bulk items, they just throw them on the sidewalk, or they throw them on an island, even on a boulevard in front of a park, because they want to dispose of it, and that's dumping. And why can't we charge them for that, rather than charge everybody $8 a year to pick up the illegal ones? That's what I'm talking about.
So, yeah, so we're
Yeah.
not, the intent is not to charge the $8 a year. That is not to cover the illegal dumping. We are working actively with our colleagues in MLS through enforcement strategies to target illegal dumping, which has a fine associated with it, and we're actually looking in the division at other means of charging those customers for those types of set-outs where there is an illegal wrongdoing of some nature. What this covers is perfectly acceptable within the policy and within the bylaw set-outs. As crazy as this picture looks, that's acceptable. What we're trying to do is recover our costs for going out and servicing that particular set-out.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I think that that fee should be charged to the apartment building that's putting out all these bulk items.
So we looked at a
Like the
number of
ones that
different...
are using this service, single-family homes, they don't put that much bulk items out. Why should they be charged?
Well, but recognize this is an $8 per unit charge. So this building itself would be paying more than $8. It's a per unit, per household.
So if you've got a high-rise, it'd be $8 per unit?
Per unit, yeah. So if you've got 10 units, it's an $80 charge.
So, and then these multi-residential, they'll be charging probably increasing tenant rents to pay for the cost. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
It's going to be, it's going to, okay, whatever, okay.
Councillor Layton?
Thank you very much. First, on the interdivisional charges, 3.3 million. Why such the significant increase?
That's a combination of a number of things. The largest one is internal fleet pressures related to maintenance on the aging fleet. But there are other internal charges that we receive. We're doing more enforcement, so our charges from MLS go up. We're, I think, 311's largest customer within the city, so the more calls that come into 311, which they are going up, things like bin exchanges, for example, that gets routed through 311, so we get a charge from 311 for all those calls that they receive.
Okay. The compressed natural gas, what percentage of the fleet was it that we were able to convert?
It's being switched over right now. It's the new trucks that are arriving to service the new green bins are the compressed natural gas trucks.
Okay.
Do you know, Rob, do you know what the percentage is, roughly?
I was wondering what the potential is for us to do to jumpstart this conversion so that we can realize more.
So what we would, because of the current state of the fleet and the age of the trucks, we would never retrofit them for CNG, but certainly our practice moving forward when we buy new trucks would be to spec CNG. Recognizing that it's more than just the truck with CNG. You've got to have appropriate fueling stations. You've got to have maintenance facilities that you can maintain CNG trucks in. So there is a bigger picture than just purchasing the truck. But the business case overall is very good for us to use CNG. And it's even better when we start producing our own renewable natural gas. Because from our anaerobic digestion facilities, for example, we are essentially creating a fuel product that we can then use in our collection vehicles to go out and collect more fuel.
And so do we have a timeline to roll out an increase in this technology in the additional fleet, or?
Well, currently, we are not allowed to buy any new vehicles until the contracting out debate is resolved. Once that is resolved, we will, depending on what it says, we will move forward with.
So we can't address the interdivisional charges from fleet or this larger investment into compressed natural gas until we've resolved this issue that you can't buy any new trucks. The service level, bylaw enforcement didn't have a service level. It doesn't have a sort of the amount of time that we guarantee an inspection will be done. Why is that? I think it's one of the only ones. Yeah, enforcement as required. On Page 26, I'm on the analyst notes. I got my binder. But everything else has the bylaw enforcement for, it just doesn't have a service level standard. It's as required. But in my experience, we call and it takes weeks for inspections to get out. I'm wondering if we wouldn't be well served to put a service standard in that.
We'd have to look at it in detail, but I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. One of the things that we're working on within the division right now is a key performance metrics project where we are doing a complete overhaul of all the different metrics and data that we collect and how we measure the performance of our division, with the intent that we can then share that information with you guys on an annual basis as well. And these are the types of metrics that I'd like to see involved in there and report back.
We put up signs in alleyways that say up to a $50,000 fine for illegal dumping. How many of those have we, how much fine revenue have we got from
Yeah, I'd have to get the answer from MLS, but it's not very many.
Okay. And then finally, or two quick questions. What has been the trend in the vehicle reserve? Did we stop paying into it? Is that why we're seeing the increase now? Or?
We have not, it's not that we stopped paying into it, it's that there wasn't as much put into it as what we now know should have been. And that is partly because over the last number of months, we've done a considerable amount of work with Fleet to update our data and knowledge base on exactly the current state of the fleet, which a year ago, to be fair to my predecessor, that type of information wasn't necessarily available to the degree it is now. So we have much better data on exactly what we need.
And with the indulgence of the chair, I just have one question. I think it's to clerks about what the rates that are being posted, how much flexibility is there in them after we post them? So these are going to be posted in some way, and then can they be changed later on? Once they're posted, they can be changed. It's not like set in stone. We don't have to repost it. We can change them. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. In terms of recycling bins, the large recycling bins, do we make, let's say it's a household fills it up, do we make money or lose money on those?
On the recycling bin itself?
On the actual contents. Like what's our, you mentioned in the commercial side that you had all those bins lined up, some were green, some were recycling, and the cost for all those was $57.
On those commercial setouts, we would be losing money. There isn't
On the recycling, the items inside?
Correct. There isn't enough value in that material to offset the cost.
So the same thing would apply in households, though?
We're, look at Vince, we're kind of at a break-even point because we've got some stewardship funding that gets injected into the system as a revenue stream to offset our costs.
Okay, well, that's a different issue. I'm just talking about whatever's in the bin, we lose money on recycling. Forget who's contributing extra.
In terms of the overall plus or minus, I would say we're pretty close to losing money.
Okay, that's fine.
We can get you the specific number.
Yeah, that's good.
Just, I was just through the chair, on an annual basis, we generate about $20 to $21 million of revenue through selling the commodities that we pick up in the residential. You include the stewardship funding that we receive, and our Blue Bin program is practically at a neutral.
But excluding the stewardship fund, what is our?
Excluding the stewardship fund, when we receive about $20 million in stewardship funding, the Blue Box program does cost us more money than, say, garbage collection.
Okay, thanks. What's our overall fuel cost? Do we know that for all our vehicles?
I think it's $4 million. Yeah.
$4 million. And going to LNG, we save almost $1 million, $750,000.
Based on the fleet that we've got now, yes.
And then what's the impact of cap and trade?
Significant, but the extent of which we don't know yet until the specific details come out. What we do know, and we are working closely with the province and other agencies, that we will not be a regulated emitter, so we will be able to produce and sell offsets. But we don't know what the value of the market will be right now. The province has an agreement with Quebec and California, so we're speculating $15 a ton CO2 might be the starting buy price. But we've got a lot of work to do in terms of understanding both what the legislation is going to say and then how we internalize that within the city.
Okay, so a lot of work to do. Okay, thanks. And then back to this $8 surcharge. So that applies to any residence, right? House, apartment, doesn't matter?
That's correct.
And that would cover, like, if I throw out a couch?
Yes.
Okay. And that's an annual fee. So if I wanted a private contractor, or just, you know, like, got junk, to come and pick up my couch, what's the cost of that? Do you know?
We can run some specific numbers. We have ballpark.
Ballpark.
To come to your house to pick it up, it could be $60 to $100.
So it would take, based on that, it would take about 7 years of me throwing out anything to make up for the 7.5 years for the city fee. So it's a pretty good deal.
That's the way we believe, yeah. It's a pretty good deal compared to if you had to secure a private contractor to come in and do it for you.
Right, and the reality, back to, Councillor Layton touched on it, in terms of actually, I know there's a huge dumping, or at least there was a huge dumping issue up at the zoo, but in terms of actually catching people with, you know, dumping toilets or couches, short of them putting their name on the item, it's very difficult, right?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DiCiano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the privatization of solid waste back in 10 or 11, Yonge Street was a dividing line. Did we reduce the city's pickup by 50%, or what was the percentage that we actually privatized versus the percentage that we kept to collect?
So roughly 1/4. So Etobicoke was already private and has been since amalgamation. It was from Yonge over to Etobicoke was the section that was privatized.
Okay. We have closed landfills. You mentioned continue to cost us dearly in maintenance. Why is that?
So we have legislated obligations that we have to continue to monitor environmental performance of those sites, which includes mostly groundwater monitoring to make sure that there aren't any leakage into the groundwater. So we have to do that. That requires maintenance and repair. You know, so it's basically just general maintenance to make sure that we're meeting all our environmental commitments on the sites.
And what's that costing us for all these closed sites a year?
It's in the neighborhood of $9 to $10 million a year to maintain those sites.
Okay. And with respect to the biofuels, the capture debate, have we done an analysis on what the investment would be to give us the capacity to capture our biofuels?
We have, yes, and we actually presented a report to Public Works Committee back in, I think, June that spoke to this. The actual initial capital investment is only for our Disco anaerobic digestion facility is in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million to install all the equipment, get it set up and running. And the return on that investment is 2 to 3 years, and then it's a revenue stream after that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Going to outside councillors now. We'll start with Councillor Davis, then Perks.
Okay. How have we assessed the loss of commercial customers with these rate increases? For instance, you clearly have to find a balance between increasing rates and retention of your current customers. So the $8 per unit on a high-rise, or the increase to the commercial for the yellow bag program, we're going to see losses there of people participating in the program. Have we assessed that?
We have, yes, yes.
And where you can provide us with some data about that?
We can provide you with some data on the multi-residential in particular. On the commercial, the challenge with the commercial right now is the portion that they are paying is so little compared to the actual cost to service them. If I was to say purely from a financial interest, we would be best to lose those customers right now.
But we don't want to just
No, and
lose
that's
those
what I'm
customers.
saying. Purely from a financial perspective,
I understand that, but I know those little commercial operators on the Danforth. The BIAs are talking about getting another hauler to come and just go down the back lanes and pick up all private,
So-
get all
so when-
private pickup.
And certainly they're entitled to do that. They don't have to use our services, but
We have an interest in them recycling.
we do. And so what we've put forward here is an approach that would be consistent or less than what we understand the private sector costs are to provide these similar services. So it's not as though what we're proposing here would now be more expensive than what they would have to pay a private sector for. But we have to find that balance between what it's actually costing us to provide these services and what the private sector comparator is if they leave our system.
So what percentage of customers will we lose in both the multi-res and in the commercial if we introduce these rates? Do we have those?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know whether, Vince, you've got them. We can certainly get those to you.
Okay, and I'm still struggling to understand how you took the 3.9% increase and spread it out and applied it against each of the bins.
So what we did was, over the last year, we've had KPMG in helping us develop a full cost recovery model and cost allocation model. So we understand the exact cost to collect a small bin of garbage, a large recycling blue bin,
Okay,
so that we understand what our costs are.
I understand now, KPMG. Okay, when did we decide, maybe I can just ask finance staff or the CFO, that we were moving to a pay-as-you-go full cost recovery model for solid waste? When did we decide that?
2008, was it? 2008.
So we never, though, decided that that full cost recovery approach would be allocated per designated service. It's a pooled cost we were talking about.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are many ways to implement a rate-based program. An average-based rate, a more specific user paid, depending on the type of customer. And the program needs to evolve over time. I think an interesting point is slide 16.
I had one question. Did we decide that it was by service? The answer is no, right?
It was a very simple, basic approach to the
Okay.
cost
It
recovery
was a
at that
general-
time.
Right, okay.
If I can,
So,
Mr. Chair,
but
to
what
add
we're-
to that.
I understand why you are looking at getting a greater share of the actual cost by service, because some of them are quite extreme, and I understand why you're looking at it. What I don't understand, though, is why you've chosen to do it so quickly. Could I just ask about the special event fee? Are we talking about charging small organizations, big organizations, the same? Does this apply to parks? Where are all the details about this in the analyst notes?
They will likely be in the analyst notes, and they will certainly be in the report that we're coming forward with. But basically what it is
Wait a
an
minute, wait a
hourly.
minute. Are we in a situation where we're getting a report that has a policy change after the budget's approved?
Well, no, there's a report that has to come forward in advance of budget committee, an
In
actual
advance,
committee report.
okay.
Yes.
So just through, there are two rate reports that normally accompany the budget, and they will be before Budget Committee for the November 18th meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Perks next.
Thank you. Slide 34, the recommendations for the single-family rebate. I understand that there's something coming with the tax-supported budget that gives a long-term thing, but I just want to make sure my memory of this is correct. At present, some amount of money is collected in the operating budget, the tax budget, and transferred over to your department to support some of your work. Is that right?
That's correct.
Does this budget change that amount?
No, it does not.
So you expect exactly the same amount of revenue from the operating budget in 2017 as you got in 2016?
Correct. So through you, Mr. Chair, so there's $158 million that from the tax budget that's used to reduce the actual amount paid by customers.
I understand. And is that amount,
That amount is in the tax budget, so it's not set in this budget. So this budget doesn't do anything in terms of changing that amount. Those discussions, if any, would occur in the
okay, hang on, I want to make sure I completely understand this. So when we get to the operating budget, we may or may not change that amount. That might or might not, let's suppose it does, that would change the amount of money available to him?
No, it would not.
His department?
It would not.
Where would it go then? Just vanish into the ether?
It would go in that ratepayers would pay more. The waste management budget in front of you here would remain whole. It's the mix. How much would come from
Okay, but if his budget
tax-supported
comes from,
service?
there's a mystery here that I can't put my finger on. If the ratepayer, so if the tax, let's suppose the transfer from the tax-supported budget goes down, that would mean that the rates go up.
That would mean that the rebates go down.
Yes.
So that the amount that each ratepayer pays is higher.
And there's no assumption about the rate changing as a result of the rebate changing in the budget that you have in front of us.
That's correct. In this one, it assumes the same.
Okay, thank you very much.
That discussion, as I said, would occur through the tax budget.
Okay, I just needed to make sure there was no assumption made anywhere in these numbers. I did want to pursue some of the questions we had from Councillor Davis about the policy and the KPMG, I assume it's activity-based costing study. When council asked for there to be a cost recovery, we were asking for cost recovery with this department. Is that correct? That was the direction from council? That solid waste be cost recovery?
I believe, if I can answer that, the direction in the long-term strategy when it was commissioned was to undertake a process to develop a fully sustainable rate program, future rate program or something.
Okay, so the direction from council was not, however, to abandon our previous direction of having incentives built into the program and replace that with having each activity recover its individual cost. You have not had that council direction, have you?
No, we have not had that council direction, nor would I suggest that's what we're trying to do. In the end, even as we move forward with these rate increases, there is still a direct financial incentive to produce less garbage.
But the budget that you have in front of us, because it has the new fee for changing down bin size and on a percentage basis, the increase to the small bin is vastly higher than the increase on a percentage basis to other bins. You have removed some of the incentive that existed in the system last year and made it less powerful in this year. That would be fair.
I would say that at no time is it going to be cheaper to put garbage into a medium bin than a small bin.
I didn't ask you if it would be cheaper. I asked you if because of the new fee to change down and because the percentage increase in the cost of having a small bin is much greater than the percentage increase of having a large bin, the amount of incentive that the City of Toronto had in 2016 was larger than the incentive we would have going forward if we adopt these measures.
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, if I may answer that question. On a percentage basis, that may be correct, but on a dollar basis, that would not be correct. So if you
Right,
turn
so I'm
to
correct on
slide
it.
30, the dollar increase.
Okay, I asked two questions, Mr.
still the
Rossini. If I could
smallest.
have the answer about the losing the incentive because of now charging to go down a bin. That actually removes some of the incentive that we had. It's a disincentive to go down.
One could probably argue that. I certainly wouldn't support that argument.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Councillor De Beermaker's next.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just wondering if you could put up slide number 22 about the commercial bag only customers. And I'm sort of looking across the room at Mr. Spirazza when I think he was hired just as we started this process. And I will call this a very successful after picture. Because before this, we had our garbage, well, our recycling would have been a little bag at the end, and the garbage was all those valuable materials that we wanted diverted. So this has achieved exactly what we wanted it to achieve. in that I'll call it 90% of their waste is being diverted, and that little teeny bag that we charge for at the end, or the 2 bags there, are going into the landfill site. So are you confident that the structural changes you're suggesting won't tell that business owner, forget the blue bin, forget the green bins, just throw it all in the garbage, because again, it's going to be cheaper for you?
And I would agree with you. This, purely from an environmental perspective, is a good news story, assuming that they are actually using our garbage service, which in some cases...
Well, they have to. There are totes.
Well, yes, but there are examples where they put a token bag out and actually have a big dumpster in the back so that they can get this free diversion service.
Okay.
But, so I do want to flag that we do know that that is happening in certain circumstances.
Yep.
What we don't want to do is encourage or discourage good environmental behavior, which, assuming they're doing what they're supposed to be here, this is a good example. At the same time, we need to be cognizant that we need to be, and so does the customer, they need to be aware of the actual cost that is being incurred to provide these services.
Okay. So doesn't that come back to when we first created this model of putting, I'll call it a flat fee, so that you're going to cover those costs, because we want to go to cost. I fully support cost recovery, but that you do it in a way that you're in, and we still want you to behave like this.
So that's what we're proposing to do here. If this was this is the bag-based system. If they had garbage in bins, they're already paying a flat fee. This is just the one anomaly in the system where they're not being charged this flat fee. So what we're proposing is essentially bring them up to the same standard that everyone else is being held to.
Okay, great. Well, we'll discuss that offline as well. And I'm going to just flip over to slide number 30. I think here your cost, so in terms of our ordinary residents, the cost increase this year for most garbage bins from small to extra large ranges from $12 to $24, correct?
Correct.
And at the extra large bin, if my memory is correct, I think we did an analysis that showed that 85% of the stuff in an extra large bin is actually recycling and organics. It was some outrageous number, like 85%. Is that about right?
We have done audit work that suggests that there are a number of poor performers with the extra large bin.
So don't we want to just eliminate the extra large bin?
So what we're recommending is not to completely eliminate the extra large bin, because there are circumstances within the city where it's appropriate. And if we were to get rid of it, it would mean that we just have to service multiple smaller bins instead of one large bin. What we're proposing, though, is targeted enforcement, so to make sure that the people who do have an extra large bin are not using it as just a dumpster for everything.
Right, so in my subdivision, if you know there's 30 homes with extra large bins, you and I know our inspector will go out and give 30 fines, or 29 fines.
That's what we're looking at doing.
Okay, and I don't think we've really done that before.
No, we have not.
Okay, and do I understand one of the slides correctly that you're going to eliminate the free leaf pickup service for Etobicoke, and I think it's really mostly Etobicoke? I saw it here.
So it's a reallocation of the service from transportation into solid waste. Whether it is a change in service is something that, because right now transportation is responsible for the vacuum leaf system collection in Etobicoke and parts of Scarborough. That's a transportation related service. Because it's leaf and yard collection, which is really our business, there's a transfer of that service from transportation to us.
Okay, so the service...
If there is a change in service, that's something that transportation will have to bring forward.
Okay, so yours is just a financial number here. You're not proposing eliminating that. I'll call it I think it's in one area of Scarborough plus the rest of Etobicoke.
Yeah,
okay.
You're almost up out of time there, Councillor.
Yep, sorry, last question through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the high rises that are exiting the system to avoid the recycling in the organics, we're looking at the licensing committee of landlord licensing. So you're saying to us it's your opinion that we could require all high-rise buildings, whether they're in our system or they're outside of our system, that they mandatory recycling and mandatory green bin collection?
That's something that we've been talking with MLS about.
Because it's mandatory if we provide the service.
Many of these buildings are already caught by provincial legislation that
But it's
isn't
not
enforced. So we're looking at, is there a mechanism through something we already have to enact a similar process?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, it is now 25 after 12. We should be ending at 12:30 for a lunch break. Now, what we have Toronto Parking Authority to present, ask questions, and we have an opportunity to speak. So I'm at your will if it didn't appear that the councillors on the committee want to do a second round. So we're good with that. So do we want to work through? Do we want to have a half-hour break, an hour break? I'm at again, Park Authority is up next. We'll probably be a lot quicker, and then we have some speaking opportunities. So you want to work through? Yeah, we'll have an opportunity to speak through at the end of all the presentations. So if you want to work through, I'm fine with that. I'm getting the sense that no, they won't. No, so they're done. That's what we do. Yes, Councillor. Yeah. Toronto Water, it looks like they've already left, so
well,
they're all listening in their offices, so.
Well, we don't have to speak. It's not necessary.
You'll have many
for us to
opportunities to speak in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. So why don't I'd like to move a motion to extend to finish the agenda. All in favor? Approved. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jim? We're going to go now to Parking Authority. Now, as I understand, Lauren couldn't be here actually now it's this afternoon, so I believe you had a family matter, but if you could just introduce yourself and we can get into the Parking Authority. We'll give it about a minute for the switchover. Okay, can we have the councillors have a seat and just a quick introduction for us, and then you can begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Marie Casista. I'm Vice President Real Estate with the Toronto Parking Authority. I would like to extend Lauren Persico's regrets. He would like to have been in attendance today, but unfortunately, he was not able to make it. And I also would like to introduce to you Ms. Robin Oliphant, who is our new Vice President of Finance, who will take you through the slide. And of course, on my right, you know Ian Mayer, who's been with the Toronto Parking Authority for many years.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I would like to start first by going to slide 11. And take you through our bottom line performance for 2016 as it lays the foundation for our 2017 recommendation. Currently, our net negative expenditures or income for the projected 2016 results will come in at $56.6 million, or approximately $25 million short of the 2016 budget. That's largely as a result of the timing of one-time asset sales gains for our 15 Wellesley property. Revenue, on the other hand, if we exclude the one-time asset gains and sundry income, we are looking at a favorable 10% above budget net income position, or approximately $4.9 million. Our revenues this year are pacing well, both in on and off street. Our off street is, in particular in our core car park areas, are pacing at 7.7% ahead of budget, delivering an extra $8.7 million for revenues in 2016, offset by total gross expenditures, an unfavorable amount of roughly $3.8 million, represented primarily by municipal taxes on our 50 Cumberland property. Moving ahead, laying the foundation for our 2017 recommended operating budget is being driven by our higher revenues. For 2017, we're forecasting 63.4 million for our net negative expenditures or net income, approximately 11.2 higher than our 2016 budget. This is driven by our parking revenue, as stated before, and I will take you to our base pressure slide, slide 18, to explain a little bit further. You'll see that the net income increase of 11.2 million is being driven primarily by our revenue. Our revenue changes are increasing 18 million approximately, both on and off street and performing well. Both of these are expected to improve based on higher transaction volume as well as previously approved price increases. In the on-street, the bike lane restrictions and the other road restrictions that we're anticipating in 2017 will be offset by new meter locations. In the off-street, both the car park openings and closings are expected largely to offset each other. For gross expenditure changes, these are driven primarily from our municipal taxes, both from 50 Cumberland and as well as for market value assessments. In other operating expenditures, 1.1 million, this is driven largely from our improved transaction volume and IT projects that we will be undertaking to improve our back office efficiencies. For salaries and benefits, we have set our experience at our 2016 rates. Higher benefit pacing has been experienced in 2016. We have net new positions in our budget as well, 5 in total. 6.6 in terms of operating, and we have put in provisions for our collective bargaining arrangements to be made this year. Okay, moving ahead to slide 30, I'd like to take you through the highlights of our capital program. Oh, this is telling me to restart. Sorry, this has crashed. Obviously, it wants to go on lunch as well. Our 10-year capital budget plan across the full period is 519 million. You'll see in your slides on page 30 on your paper that 2017 is estimated to be 99 million. Throughout the 10-year program, our state of good repairs is on track and fully funded at roughly 5.5 million per year. And I would like to highlight that our program for the 10 years also includes bike lane replacements and provisions due to city initiatives of roughly 80 million. That concludes the highlights for our budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. On the screen, on the slide that talks about other road restrictions as being an impact on the revenue. Do we know other on slide 19, other road restrictions? What would those be? Like movies?
Film companies, construction, and use by non-revenue vehicles.
So you include other road restrictions and bike lanes, but you don't include rush hour restrictions?
Yes, there actually are. There's a provision in there for
So where are the rush hour restrictions?
I believe they'd be included in there. There's going to be some additional peak period extensions in the east end of the downtown.
So do you only update for 1 year, for 1 year, and then these fall off the radar?
Well, I mean, they'll continue through the base revenue projections, obviously, because we base next year on this year.
Okay.
We can only put them in as they're made known to us.
Sure, but we're not tracking these year to year, and so the other road the bike lanes provision, for instance, isn't going to be reported on every year. These are new changes that are resulting.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes, they're only things that have changed.
So the other road restrictions includes the peak hour changes that we did on Queen Street, for instance?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Councilor DiCiano.
Thanks. Just quickly, what's the enterprise value of all our assets in TPA? Do we have that number?
That's a very good question. No, we don't have that number this time.
Do we ever do that or look at what that number is on an annual basis? When was, if there was the last time we did that?
Yes, PwC, as part of our audit, does it at a very high-level basis. Was it 4 or 5 years ago, we did an optimization strategy study, and at that time, we tried to value what the value of the enterprise would be, but since then, we really haven't. We do understand that there is a survey, or there is a study underway at the present time.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Budget Chief, I was just going to add, so council did approve an asset optimization study. We've hired Deloitte. They're looking at our 2 key assets, Toronto Hydro and Toronto Parking Authority, and that report's scheduled to come to Executive Committee December 1st.
Oh, so it'll tell us what the assets are worth. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Sorry, what are the 6.6 additional staff for?
The 6.6 represents 5 new FTEs that were approved by our board for our operational transformation to improve customer service, further enhance our back office, and develop automation.
So these are internal.
These are internal.
And how many?
The other would just be based off the calculation being FTEs is just the number of hours.
How many parking enforcement officers are there on the road?
So we don't enforce on the road, but if you mean in our lots?
In the lots, that's what
We have 27,
Only 27?
yes.
So of 300 people across the whole of Toronto, we only have 27 people out monitoring the lots to make sure people are paying.
That's correct. We have 27, but only about half of our parking spaces are pay and display. So half of them are in gated facilities, so they, they obviously enforce themselves.
Oh, I see. And so how many employees do we have in the gated facilities?
I believe there's approximately 60. I can get you the exact number.
So of the 27 that are out monitoring the lots, do they pay for themselves? Are they profitable? I mean, does the amount that they write in terms of tickets exceed the cost to have that person on the road?
I'm going to give you a sort of a different answer. If we didn't have them there, nobody would pay. So they pay for themselves by the fact that we have extremely high compliance in those lots. Over 95% of people, of the parking spaces consumed are paid for.
I think I remember Lauren saying they were a little more forgiving than the TPS people.
Definitely, we're very much more forgiving because we want the customers back.
Okay, we do warnings and things like that.
We do an initial warning.
We don't chain cars and,
We do.
Oh, we do?
We have a whole escalated chain of enforcement practices, whatever is appropriate. If we have people that are, repeat offenders, we will take action. We don't actually chain, but we do tow.
So, I mean, it strikes me, and I am not on the board, I haven't sat on the board, but it strikes me as a fairly simple operation, and yet there's 300 people. I mean, the payments are fairly automated. They're either, paying through the booth or they're paying in the lots. Where do all these people, what do all these people do? Is human resources, you have your own human resources?
We don't have a lot of, yes, we do.
Okay.
But most of them are in the operations side, and we have a huge plant, like 200 and odd locations.
Right.
So a lot of it is maintaining.
Okay.
Like bumper fences are broken, landscaping, painting the lines, keeping the lights on. And cleaning, we have a huge custodial function. I mean, we have to keep the garages clean. And we also have a collection team.
I beg your pardon?
If you refer to slide 5.
5, that's what I
Gives a
have.
breakdown.
Right.
So they collect the money, obviously. Like, someone has to go around to all the machines and take the money out of the machines, obviously. So But we have a team of collectors that do that. And,
So that's not done by the 27 that are out there? You have people?
no, they enforce.
Okay.
Okay, and then there's another team that maintains we have 3,000 pay and display machines.
Right.
They have to be maintained, the tickets have to be changed, the
Right.
money has to be collected. Obviously,
Are there functions that are done, and I guess this is also for the CFO, maybe could weigh in on this, are there functions that are done at the parking authority that, such as human resources, that could be done through, sort of internally at the City of Toronto, or is that, it's just not ever going to be set up that way?
So there are, right now, there's an initiative on shared services. The TPA is participating on that. For example, we're looking at doing their insurance program and a number of things. They're sitting at the procurement table. So there's a number of initiatives on the go.
And there's a real estate
The TPA is also participating. They're part of the real estate review. Yes, that's another big one.
Okay, all right, okay, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have a few myself then. Hold on. So as I understand, community councils have the right to move motions to remove pay and display in particular areas of the city that impact your revenues. Is that correct?
in some locations, depending on the type of street that they're on.
Okay, but they can ultimately impact the revenue. And are you consulted in any way before any of this happens, or how do you find out about this after this takes place at the community council? So I'm assuming if it's a community council, it doesn't come to council, it's just the decisions are made.
Typically, yes, we are consulted. I mean, we have a very good communications function with city councilors or city transportation staff, which would typically be involved. So it's very unlikely that we would not know about this stuff ahead of time. Plus, we monitor the agendas for the committee, so if any item like that comes up.
It wouldn't be a major concern for you, year over year, I'm assuming?
The communications part, no. I mean, obviously, we want to maintain our program, but we understand that, the city has a balancing of objectives with respect to the streets.
Okay, thanks. I understand most of your prices are consistently the cheapest or cheapers compared to the market. And I know we'd had the conversation with Lauren previously about the reasons why they're kept lower is because you want turnaround, you want people coming in a lot more, and I get that. But have you done an analysis about, being able to increase those rates a bit more to ensure that we can get some more, but without losing some of that turnover or turnaround?
We constantly review the rates, and I have a team that basically that's their job. So we're looking at the rates, we're looking at our competitors' rates, and I believe that's part of what Deloitte is doing as part of their review. So we've passed all that information over to them.
Okay.
They'll be looking at it, so that'll be a third-party assessment of that.
Okay, and also on your on-street rates, I looked at the map, and according to the map, there are some areas of the city that are a lot lower, a lot higher than different areas. And Leslieville, as an example, is one of the lowest rates that you charge. Have you looked at increasing particularly that area or some of the lower areas to try to generate or drive some more revenue?
Yes, we have, and we'll be coming forward with that report early in the new year.
Okay.
It's underway now, but there are areas that, Leslieville is a specific example where the area's changed substantially and rapidly, and we have to catch up so that it's with the rates. But
okay.
Generally speaking, last year we did Roncesvalles Village and we did Parkdale, which were in the same situation as Leslieville, so
okay.
Coming through with that early next year.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we're done. We're now into speakers. I will start with Councillor Layton. We are now in committee, just to let you know.
Thank you very much. I have a motion that City Council direct, effective Jan 1, 2017, the industrial water surcharge program formula for the calculation of surcharge fees be applied to all treatable parameters that exceed the sewer bylaw limits, instead of only one of the parameters that exceeds the sewer bylaw limits by the greatest amount, allowing full cost recovery for the wastewater services provided by the city. Such surcharges to be phased in over a 6-year period to mitigate impacts to existing companies. This is the same motion I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 times, maybe just 5 times. I think it came, I'm getting a nod from the clerks, 5 times. We have had business analysis done with economic development. We've heard all of the different levels of people that have recommended this, from the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association, the Association of Luz, from the accountant, our Auditor General, their reports, from our director, from our General Manager of Toronto Water. I'm going to try it again, see what happens. It's $1.5 million in revenue. It's not about the money, to be honest. This is about a policy and an approach to how we do this, and that's to ensure that we're actually accounting for the full cost of something that we're providing to businesses that we don't need to. We could tell them, no, you just can't discharge your water if it's above those levels. We don't. We pay for it, and we pay for it collectively as a rate base now, which we shouldn't. There are incentives that we give out for water conservation, that we give businesses a bit of a break so they're not paying for the full charge of their water. But that's so that they accomplish something, so that they save water, so that they reduce it. It's not so that they can just keep getting away with using a lot of water. For that, they have to go through certain plans. I believe I have to also move to withdraw this motion. If you will recall, this is what we did last year. I just need to get it on record because we are posting the rates, and that is that's all I really need to say about that. I'm a little concerned about the amount that we're budgeting for lead water replacement. I think that that's a conversation that we need to have to make sure we're still running that program effectively. And the notion that perhaps we revisit some of the water efficiency programs because of the savings that we could incur is, I think, worthwhile. We canceled the water efficiency programs 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. Perhaps it's time to revisit that. I'd like to congratulate Lou and his team, though. I think this is a great example. You see that line on state of good repair going down. This is when you commit to a path that's an overinflationary increase, but you're doing it with a goal in mind, and you stick to it, what you can accomplish. 9 over 9, or whatever it was, that was tough. Those were tough years. I was only around for the last couple 9s, and having to continuously defend that, I think, was tough, but look where it got us. We're now at the 5s, and we're going to be down at the 3s soon enough. And that will mean that all of that dirty work underground that no other level of government really wants to come in and pay for, and that we can't cut ribbons out, will be done. At least it'll be up to speed. So I think that when we look at budgeting that way over the long term, you see results. And after the initial discussion of 9 over 9, you know what happens? People stop freaking out when that 9% bill comes. I think that's an approach we may want to think about when we go into the tax-supported budget in the coming month, that we might want to consider that long-term sustainability in our discussion. Now to solid waste, I'm not sure how easily some of these new fees are going to fly, to be quite honest. I'm not sure that I think we may have lost this connection between the cost and achieving some of our diversion goals. And we need to make sure that our fees are in fact reinforcing the wider diversion goals and the environmental goals of the city. So I'm eager to look at more of that, but I think it does show us another thing, that if we want good service, we're going to have to pay for it. And all these things require money. So if we want to continue to have waste collection and a long-term waste plan and trucks that aren't falling apart on our roads, to be honest, that we have to pay more for now than new trucks would have cost, then we are going to have to come up with the money. So those are just a couple of the things I think that will help frame the discussion moving forward.
Thank you. So just confirming you have withdrawn that motion? Yes. Thank you. Okay. You can bring it back on the 18th. Any other speakers? Councillor Layton Campbell, sorry.
I thank Councillor Layton for putting it in the form of a motion and not a member's motion, bringing it to the committee. I would like to find out more. I've talked to Mr. Rossini. I would like to see a briefing note on it. I think it's certainly worth consideration, and kudos for you for keep trying. I guess the one thing that stuck with me on the presentation today was with respect to the solid waste budget, the $8 a year, which is really nothing for people to put out their items that don't fit in either of the bins. but I think it needs to be just blended into the rate, because otherwise you're going to have a separate line item that will invariably go up every year and be another cause of irritation for taxpayers. The other matter concerns the bin charge for exchanging a bin. I don't think we should be in any way, shape, or form penalizing residents who choose to recycle more and put out less garbage, and even if it's only $25, I think that the people in solid waste should just find a way of absorbing that cost within the overall rates. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Council. Any other speakers? Okay, if not, are we adjourned, or do we motion to receive the report or the reports? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're adjourned till the 18th. Have a good weekend, all.